Chapter 228. Go to watch net. This awkward and ambiguous atmosphere lasted until Zhou Keqiang entered the room. He looked at the two of them and coughed dryly. Only then did Li Yundong come to his senses. He coughed dryly and said to Zhou Keqiang, "Uncle Zhou, I'll come back tomorrow. Go to watch net." 7 K.O. Hong O.M. Zhou Keqiang looked at him meaningfully and nodded. "Well, that's good. You should accompany Qin more often. After all." He wanted to say, "After all, she has done so much for you." He wanted to use these words to warn Li Yundong not to be ungrateful. However, Zhou Qin was keenly aware of what Zhou Keqiang was going to say next. She quickly said, "Li Yundong, if you have something to do tomorrow, you don't have to come. I'm fine." Li Yundong had already gotten up and walked to the door. He turned around and smiled. "It doesn't matter. I have nothing to do tomorrow anyway." After that, he ran away as if he wanted to escape. Zhou Keqiang looked at Li Yundong's departing figure and sighed. "Why are you so stubborn? If you don't say it clearly, some people will never understand it, or pretend not to understand it." After Li Yundong left, Zhou Qin's face seemed to be wearing a mask again. She said coldly, "It's none of your business. I don't want this kind of thing that I beg for. If I want something, I always get it myself. It's not someone else's turn to give it to me." Zhou Keqiang smiled bitterly and said, "Are you really stupid? If you don't take the opportunity to snatch him away now, when will you?" Zhou Qin's eyes were complicated. She was silent for a long time before she slowly said, "I am not a person who takes advantage of others' difficulties, nor am I a person who demands repayment. I like him because I like his single-mindedness. If he was a fickle person, I would have left him instead." Zhou Keqiang stared at his daughter with wide eyes, as if he had met her for the first time. "Aren't you asking for trouble? Are you a pervert? Won't you be alone for the rest of your life?" Zhou Qin's eyes were blurred. She said foolishly, "As long as he can look at me more when he's free, talk to me more, and cook for me more, I'll be very happy." Zhou Keqiang looked at Zhou Qin in extreme shock and said loudly, Qin, you are really crazy. You." Before he could finish his words, Zhou Qin suddenly shouted at him, "Get out. I don't want you to care about me. Get out." As she said this, she picked up everything she could pick up and threw it at Zhou Keqiang. Zhou Keqiang had no choice but to scurry out of the room like a rat, leaving Zhou Qin alone with the pillow in her arms. When Li Yundong returned home, as soon as he entered the door, he saw Ruan Hongling sitting in the living room watching TV. Zi Yuan was busy in the kitchen, and there was a clanging sound of chopping vegetables. "Watch net." Li Yundong was taken aback. "Don't you have your own family? What are you doing here watching TV?" Ruan Hongling rolled her eyes at him in annoyance. "My sister Zi Yuan takes care of you all day long. Can't I just come and sit around casually? Why? Don't you welcome me? It's fine if you don't welcome me. I'm leaving." As she said this, she stood up, patted her butt, and was about to leave. However, as if she wanted to see the world in chaos, she shouted into the kitchen, "Sister Zi Yuan, someone dislikes me and thinks I'm an eyesore. I'll go back first." Li Yundong was still a little overwhelmed by Zhou Qin. Seeing the situation at home, he suddenly felt a headache coming on. He quickly stretched out his hands and said, Okay, I'm afraid of you. You can do whatever you want." Ruan Hongling snorted and said proudly, "Well, that's what you said. I didn't force you to do this." Li Yundong was so angry that he glared at Ruan Hongling and said, "You've taken advantage of me, and you still want to show off, don't you?" Ruan Hongling and Li Yundong didn't get along well, and her natural strength was restrained. When Li Yundong glared at her, she was so scared that she jumped back and shouted, "Sister Zi Yuan, look, he's bullying me again. Ziyuan came out of the kitchen with a dish and looked at them helplessly. Why don't you two go back to kindergarten and quarrel? Li Yundong and Ruan Hongling pointed at each other at the same time and shouted at the same time, she, quarreled first. After the two of them finished speaking, they were stunned at the same time. They looked at each other and shouted at the same time, why are you imitating my words? Ziyuan put down the dish in her hand and couldn't help laughing. Have you two cultivated the mind-reading ability? Are you so telepathic? Ruan Hongling immediately stomped her feet and scolded, Bah, who wants to have a telepathic connection with him? Li Yundong retorted bluntly, I don't care. I only have a telepathic connection with my little girl. Ruan Hongling said angrily, what are you proud of? You're just a witch. Li Yundong suddenly became furious. What did you say? Say it again. Ruan Hongling was so scared that she quickly ran behind Ziyuan. She stomped her feet and said angrily, Sister Ziyuan, look, this person doesn't give you any face at all. He's bullying your shimmy to the point where she's above your head. You don't even support me. Ziyuan felt a headache coming on. She rubbed her temples and said, can you two stop talking? Li Yundong still respected Ziyuan very much. He snorted, turned around, and walked towards his bedroom. Go to the internet. Ziyuan shouted, hey, it's almost time for dinner. Li Yundong said in a muffled voice, I have no appetite. After that, he slammed the door. After Li Yundong returned to his room, he put down the fan of 7 treasures, sat by the bed, picked up the pink Hello Little Money box, and was lost in thought. Girl. Li Yundong gently stroked the money box with his hand, and his eyes were surprisingly gentle. He murmured softly, where are you? I miss you so much. In the Fox Zen school, Ao Wushuang looked helplessly at Su Chan, who was looking around, scratching her ears and cheeks. She couldn't calm down. Ao Wushuang sighed and said, what's wrong with you? Why have you been so restless all day? Su Chan shrank her head and glanced at Ao Wushuang timidly. Don't be angry if I tell you. Ao Wushuang had been cultivating with Su Chan these days, but she found that not only had Su Chan not made any progress, but she had also been so tired that she couldn't calm down. In the past, although Su Chan's cultivation talent was not the top, she was at least first class. With hard work and a little luck, she could eventually cultivate to the realm of the 6-tailed fox spirit. But now it seemed that since this girl had met Li Yundong, her cultivation had not improved at all. At this time, her first-class cultivation seemed to be at the bottom, which was really annoying. Ao Wushuang felt that she couldn't help but get angry. She suppressed her anger and said, if you don't tell me, won't I be angry? Su Chan responded with an, oh, and said with a grievance, then I won't say it. The blue veins on Ao Wushuang's forehead twitched. Tell me. Su Chan asked weakly, do you really want me to say it? Ao Wushuang couldn't help it. She said angrily, if you don't say it, I'll kick you out. Su Chan was shocked. She got up and ran out the door. Ao Wushuang was stunned. Hey, where are you going? You haven't told me yet. Su Chan hid at the door and peeked out an eye through the wooden door. She looked at Ao Wushuang timidly and said, aren't you going to kick me out? Ao Wushuang was so angry that she laughed. I'm kicking you out of the sect, not out of this door. Get in here. Su Chan said, oh. She lowered her head and walked to the door. Suddenly, her eyes rolled and a plan came to her mind. She raised her hands and actually rolled on the ground, rolling into the door. Ao Wushuang was stunned. She stammered, what are you doing? Fortunately, the ground was made of bluestone, and there was no dust on Su Chan's body. She pretended to pat the dust off her body, blinked her eyes, and pretended to be puzzled. Didn't you ask me to roll in? Ao Wushuang took a deep breath and said, "Well, you evil disciple, I think you have made up your mind to fight with me." Su Chan giggled and quickly leaned in front of Ao Wushuang. She wrapped her arms around her and said coquettishly, "Master, don't be angry." Ao Wushuang had no idea what to do with her precious disciple. She glared at Su Chan and said, "What the hell are you doing? Tell me. If you don't tell me, I won't be polite to you." Su Chan was not afraid. She cheekily said with a cheeky smile, "I think I heard Yundong calling me just now." Ao Wushuang groaned and raised her hand to rub her temples. "Oh my God, when didn't you say that?" Su Chan pouted and said, "It was true just now." Ao Wushuang said angrily, "Then tell me, when wasn't it true?" Su Chan grabbed her arm and said coquettishly, "I don't care. It must have been true just now. I could feel it." Ao Wushuang was scared. She pointed to the door and said, "Get out, get out. Hurry up, I'm afraid of you. I won't force you to cultivate. When that guy passes the heavens tribulation, I'll send you over. In the future, let him have a headache. Let's see if he despises you." Su Chan was not in the mood to cultivate. She cheered and ran out. When she reached the door, she thought of something and turned around again. She giggled and said, "Master, Yundong loves me very much. He won't despise me." Ao Wushuang laughed and said, "Let's wait and see." Su Chan snorted and said, "Let's wait and see." She quickly walked out of the residence and came to the backyard. The backyard was very elegantly decorated. There were rockery and stone pavilions, small bridges and flowing water, fresh flowers and green grass, making it look quiet and elegant. Su Chan sat down on the stone bench and looked around. Then, she took out a paper crane from her pocket. She pointed at the paper crane and whispered, "Hey, wake up. I'm looking for you." Su Chan wanted the paper crane to fly to Li Yundong again to inform him, but when she poked it with her finger, she saw that it had fallen to one side, like an ordinary paper crane, motionless. It didn't look like it had no spiritual energy at all. Su Chan was shocked. No way. Is he dead? Or has he run out of spiritual energy? Su Chan used her hand to turn the paper crane upside down, but the paper crane didn't respond at all. She was suddenly very disappointed. No way. So useless? It died after a few trips? Su Chan was very disappointed when she thought that she couldn't send a message to Li Yundong. She stomped her feet bitterly, threw the paper crane forward, and said angrily, "You're so useless. I'm so angry." But just as she threw the paper crane out, the paper crane suddenly flapped its wings in midair and flew to the roof in an instant. F***ck, pretending to be dead? Su Chan suddenly became furious. She stood under the eaves with her hands on her hips and scolded, "You be ****, how dare you fight with me? Are you tired of living? Hurry up and come down, or I'll tear you apart." The paper crane had finally escaped from the devil's clutches, so how could it be willing to go back? It immediately shook its head like a rattle. Su Chan rolled up her sleeves and said angrily, "Well, if you have the guts, don't let me catch you." As she said this, she jumped and flew toward the paper crane. The paper crane was so scared that it trembled all over, turned around, and flew away. Su Chan laughed angrily and said, "Let's see where you can run to." As she said this, her body turned into a blue light and chased after it like lightning. Su Chan was fast, but the paper crane was not slow either. Every time Su Chan was about to catch it, the paper crane twisted its body and abruptly dodged. Su Chan was seething with anger. She chased after the paper crane. After flying through a dozen courtyards, she finally jumped and grabbed the crane under the eaves of a house. Su Chan was so angry that she could see smoke coming out of her nostrils. Su Chan laughed proudly. She was about to speak, but she heard a rustling sound coming from the room. Su Chan suddenly became curious, so she leaned over to take a look through the crack of the door. When she saw it, she was so shocked that her whole body quivered. /om/ Chapter 230. Go to watch net. The paper crane, which was about to fly into Li Yundong's hand, was stopped by Mo Ashi. Li Yundong, who knew nothing about it, was still striding forward on his own cultivation path. Go to watch net. However, on his way forward, Li Yundong stopped for a while because of Zhou Qin's matter. The next day, Li Yundong still went to the hospital to visit Zhou Qin. When he arrived at the hospital, Zhou Qin was sitting on the hospital bed, surfing the internet with a laptop. There was a faint smile on her lips, and her face was no longer as cold as before. Although her smile was faint, Li Yundong felt as if there was a feeling of spring blooming in the room. To cure a disease, emotion was the most important thing. If a patient was in a bad mood every day, then even if he took elixirs, he wouldn't be able to cure the disease. Even if he was barely cured, he would get sick again sooner or later. Zhou Qin's mood returned to normal, and Li Yundong's heart also became happy. He walked into the room and said with a smile, "You look in a good mood today." Zhou Qin's biggest worry was that she might be paralyzed in the future, but now that she knew that Li Yundong could cure her legs, her worries naturally disappeared, and her mood improved. At this time, when she saw Li Yundong visiting her, she was even happier. As soon as she was happy, Zhou Qin showed a rare little girl's temper. She raised her head and deliberately said with a straight face, "I was in a good mood, but when you came, I was in a bad mood." Although she said this, the smile and happiness hidden in her eyes could not be concealed. Li Yundong also cooperated and put on a sad look. Am I so annoying? Well, I'm leaving. Zhou Qin said angrily, "Go, go." Li Yundong walked to the door and turned his head. "Hey, I'm really leaving." Zhou Qin smiled and said, "I won't see you out." Li Yundong chuckled and really turned to go out the door. Sitting on the bed, Zhou Qin couldn't help but burst into laughter. She smiled sweetly, and her eyes moved. In an instant, the cold ward became bright and beautiful. She snorted in a low voice. "Let's see if you'll come in or not." After she finished speaking, she lowered her head and continued to look at her notebook, but her eyes glanced at the door from time to time. She looked for a while and saw that there was no one at the door. She couldn't help but think to herself, "This guy can't be so petty and really leave, right?" Zhou Qin waited for a while, but there was still no sign of Li Yundong at the door. She couldn't help but feel a little anxious. She straightened up and shouted at the door, but she was a little embarrassed to call Li Yundong's name directly. She only said, "Hey, hey." She shouted for a while. At the door, she only saw some patients and nurses passing by looking at her ward in confusion, but Li Yundong was nowhere to be seen. Watch net. Net. Super_speed. More. Nu Zhou Qin panicked. Just as she was about to shout again, she suddenly heard a familiar voice beside her. "Hey, beauty, who are you calling?" Zhou Qin turned her head and saw Li Yundong standing on the other side of her. The boy she had been thinking about day and night was winking at her with a sneaky smile. Zhou Qin was startled. "Why are you here? Are you a ghost?" Li Yundong chuckled. He pointed to the door connecting the balcony corridor and the ward and said with a smile, "You have a corridor here." I walked to the ward next door, then passed through the corridor from the back door and walked in. Zhou Qin was tongue-tied. How long have you been standing next to me?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "I think it started when you said that I wanted to see if you could come in or not." Zhou Qin's face suddenly turned red. She was ashamed and annoyed. She picked up the pillow behind her and hit Li Yundong with all her might. You're so annoying, you're so annoying. Go away, I don't want to see you. Li Yundong laughed and ran 2 steps away. He said, "Hey, do you really want me to go? Then I'll really go." Zhou Qin opened her mouth and wanted to say, "Go away," but the words were stuck in her throat. She was afraid that the boy would really leave this time. Who would she cry to? "You bastard, don't you know how to give in to me? Why do you always have to control me? Did I owe you in my previous life?" Zhou Qin thought bitterly in her heart. Don't you know that girls sometimes say one thing and mean another? You're so annoying. Seeing that Zhou Qin was silent, Li Yundong said, "Hey, you're not going to say anything? Then I'm leaving." Zhou Qin immediately threw the pillow at him angrily. "Go away, go away. Don't come back again." Li Yundong saw that he had made Zhou Qin angry, so he laughed and took the pillow. He stopped talking about it and sat down beside her bed. He put the fan of 7 treasures aside and said with a smile, "What were you looking at just now? You looked so happy." Zhou Qin rolled her eyes at Li Yundong. "What else could I be looking at? The school forum." Speaking of this, she suddenly became excited and asked Li Yundong, "Are you going to perform at this year's welcome party?" "Welcome party?" Li Yundong was stunned for a moment. "Isn't it today?" Zhou Qin nodded excitedly like a little girl chasing after a star. "Yes, what are you going to perform today? The last performance is still vivid in my mind." Li Yundong smiled. "Isn't it arranged by senior sister Feng Na? It's a play from the legend of Sword and Fairy. I think it's the part where the sword sage takes Zhao Linger away. I'm going to watch it." 7 K.O.M. Zhou Qin widened her eyes and asked, "Who are you going to play? You must be Li Xiaoyao, right?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I'm not going to play Li Xiaoyao, the loser who ends up alone in the end. I'm going to play the sword sage." Zhou Qin let out an "ah," and a yearning look appeared in her eyes. She slowly leaned back and said faintly, "I really want to see it, but unfortunately, I can't." Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. "If you don't mind, I'll push you to see it." Zhou Qin's eyes lit up. "Can I? Will it be troublesome for you?" Li Yundong thought to himself, "You ruined your own family for me and almost became disabled. If I don't even want to do this, wouldn't I be a cold-blooded beast?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "What are you talking about? Let me give you a massage, and then we'll go." Zhou Qin smiled happily. "That's great. Do you want a massage now?" Li Yundong nodded, picked her up, and put her in the wheelchair. Then, he pushed her out and massaged her as he had done yesterday. However, this time, he chatted with Zhou Qin as he ran his qi. "By the way, why are you the only one in this ward?" Zhou Qin closed her eyes and said, "I booked all the other beds. I don't like to live with other patients." Li Yundong knew that Zhou Qin loved silence and was even more afraid of being harassed, so he didn't think too much about it. He asked curiously, "Then why don't you stay in the VIP room?" Zhou Qin snorted coldly. "Isn't it because of the bureaucrats in the health system? When they saw that my father had lost power, they all came to trample on him and me. They said that the VIP rooms were all full." "Humph, nonsense. The VIP rooms have never been full all year round. Others may not know, but I do." Li Yundong couldn't help but be silent when he heard this. He sighed and said, "Zhou Qin, you will stand up again one day." This sentence had a double meaning, alluding to both her feet and her future life. Zhou Qin couldn't help but sigh in her heart when she heard this. She tried to move her toes and found that her toes were already flexible and obedient. She knew that she was actually fine. If she wanted to stand up, she could stand up now. But she was unwilling to stand up. In her opinion, this was the happiest period of her life. She would rather sit in a wheelchair like this for the rest of her life, as long as Li Yundong was willing to come to see her every day, talk to her, and make her laugh. Li Yundong didn't know what Zhou Qin was thinking. After he finished running his qi, he felt that the blood clots and tumors in Zhou Qin's body had almost dissipated. He asked, "How do you feel now? Can you feel your feet?" Zhou Qin turned her face away, not daring to look into Li Yundong's eyes. She shook her head and said, "No, I don't feel anything." Li Yundong was a little disappointed and surprised. He thought to himself, how could there be no effect? This is impossible. After a while, he smiled and said, "Forget it. Let's go to school first. You haven't been back for a long time. Your classmates miss you very much." Zhou Qin smiled and said, "Miss me? That's not possible. It's possible that they miss you because you haven't been there for a few days. I've seen posts on the forum asking why you haven't been to school these days." Li Yundong smiled. He pushed Zhou Qin and said hello to Zhou Keqiang, who happened to run into him in the corridor. Then, he also said goodbye to the nurse in charge and pushed Zhou Qin out of the hospital building. After leaving the building, Li Yundong stopped a car and put Zhou Qin in the back seat. Then, he put the collapsible car in the trunk of the car, and the two of them went to school. After getting out of the car, Li Yundong took Zhou Qin out of the car and put her in the wheelchair, then pushed her into the school. Along the way, all the students who saw Li Yundong were surprised. When they saw Zhou Qin, their eyes widened, as if they couldn't imagine why such a beautiful and elegant girl was sitting in a wheelchair. At first, Li Yundong was worried that Zhou Qin might not be able to stand the stairs. But when he saw that Zhou Qin's face was calm and composed, he couldn't help but admire her. She's a girl from a respectable family after all. Her psychological quality is really strong. Before he reached the school building, he saw Feng Na. Feng Na was surprised and happy when she saw him. "Li Yundong, I finally found you," she shouted from a distance. Li Yundong saw her and Cheng Cheng, who was always by her side. He suddenly laughed and said, "It's you." When Feng Na and Cheng Cheng saw Li Yundong, they also saw Zhou Qin in the wheelchair. Their hearts suddenly skipped a beat. After approaching Zhou Qin, they carefully greeted her and then asked, "Zhou Qin, what happened?" Zhou Qin smiled faintly. "It's nothing. Just a small injury. I'll get better." Li Yundong was afraid that the two girls would ask about her sadness, so he quickly gave them a look. Fortunately, Feng Na and Cheng Cheng were smart people, so they quickly reacted and changed the topic. Cheng Cheng smiled. "Li Yundong, Nana and I were just wondering if you would stand us up today. We were just talking about you, and here you are. Not bad, not bad. You're trustworthy." Li Yundong chuckled. "As long as you don't cause any more trouble next time, I'll be fine. Especially you, Feng Na." Feng Na pursed her lips into a smile. "When have I ever caused any trouble? Can you give me an example?" Li Yundong laughed. Just as he was about to expose her, he suddenly heard a soft voice coming from behind him. "Li Yundong." Li Yundong heard the voice and turned around. He was shocked. What is she doing here? Well, don't worry, the girl is silly. Fortune favors fools, /om/. Chapter 231. Go to Watch Network. Standing behind him was Ruan Hongling, who had a ponytail and was dressed in a sailor's uniform. Next to her stood Zi Yuan, who was dressed in a plain white dress. Li Yundong hadn't expected Zi Yuan to come to school at all. He asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" Zi Yuan was wearing a white dress, and her long black hair was tied up high, revealing her snow-white and flawless neck. She was like a noble swan, exuding a sense of holiness and pride. Her figure was slender and elegant, and there was not a trace of vulgarity about her. The surrounding students were all stunned. Feng Na and Cheng Cheng were also dumbfounded. They stammered, "Is she a fairy? Why is she so beautiful?" Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong lightly. She smiled slightly and said, "Can't I come?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "It's not that you can't come, but I didn't expect it." "Did you come to see me?" Yuan Hongling snorted and said, "Don't flatter yourself. Sister Zi Yuan is here to see my performance." Li Yundong asked curiously, "You? What performance do you have?" Yuan Hongling said proudly, "Don't look down on me." Li Yundong couldn't help but taunt, "Who dares to look down on you? Don't cry when you go on stage later." Yuan Hongling was furious. Just as she was about to argue with Li Yundong, she suddenly heard Feng Na look at Yuan Hongling and say, "Ah, are you the freshman beauty who performed calligraphy?" Yuan Hongling snorted, shook her head, and said arrogantly, "Who else could it be?" Li Yundong suddenly asked, "By the way, I haven't asked you yet. Why did you want to study at this university? What department are you studying?" Yuan Hongling rolled her eyes at Li Yundong and said angrily, "It's none of your business. Do I have to tell you that I'm studying history?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Do you want to be an archaeologist? History department?" The boys in the history department are in trouble. Yuan Hongling said angrily, "What do you mean by that?" Seeing the two quarreling as soon as they met, Zi Yuan said with a headache, "Can you two not quarrel here?" Li Yundong and Yuan Hongling looked around, and sure enough, the students around them were all staring at them with their mouths agape. Feng Na and Cheng Cheng were already very outstanding beauties, and they were very eye-catching. As for Zi Yuan, Yuan Hongling, Zhou Qin, and the others, they were all top-notch beauties that were rarely seen in the world. It was extremely difficult to even see one of them on normal days, let alone so many of them suddenly appearing here. Some of the freshmen looked at them with their mouths agape and tongue-tied. They couldn't help but say, "Are there so many beauties in this school? So my decision to apply to this third-rate university was actually so wise?" The senior student next to him could not help but snort disdainfully and said, "Cut the crap. You can only watch from afar and not play with her. Do you dare to go over and strike up a conversation?" The freshmen immediately laughed sheepishly. Their eyes were filled with jealousy and envy as they looked at Li Yundong, who was the center of attention. Watch net. 7ko/Feng Na was a tactful person. She smiled and said, "Let's not stand here. Let's go to the backstage of the auditorium. There are no classes today, and all the actors are there. It should be more lively now." Then, she said to Li Yundong, "By the way, since you're here, you can rehearse at the last minute. You haven't read the script yet." Feng Na couldn't help but say to Li Yundong, "How can there be an actor like you in the world?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "I'm just a guest star, not the main character." Then, he walked over to Zhou Qin and whispered, "Are you going to watch from the backstage or from the audience?" Zhou Qin had been silent at first, but now she smiled and said, "I'll watch from the audience. It's better there." Li Yundong nodded and said to Feng Na, "Then let's go to the auditorium first. It'll be good to grab a few better seats." As he spoke, the group of people ran to the school's auditorium under everyone's gaze. When they arrived at the backstage of the auditorium, they heard a commotion. Feng Na took a look and saw a group of actors who had performances backstage. A boy said loudly, "I've already called her, but no one answered. What can I do?" No one answered. "Call again. Keep calling until it gets through. What's wrong with this woman? How can she be late for such an important event tonight?" A girl in an ancient costume said loudly. "Go to the internet." 7kom. Feng Na frowned and squeezed through the crowd. What happened? The girl turned her head, and a look of joy suddenly appeared on her face. "Nana, you're here? Lu Ling hasn't come yet. I can't get through to her phone. I'm so worried." Feng Na frowned and said, "You can't get through to her cell phone?" The girl stamped her feet and said, "I can, but no one is picking up. That's why I'm so worried." Beside him, a boy dressed in an ancient costume, wearing a blue robe and a blue headscarf on his head, suddenly said, "Could something have happened?" As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd spat in unison, "Bah, you jinx." Li Yundong pulled Feng Na's arm and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong? Who is Lu Ling? An actress? If her role is not important, can't we just find someone to replace her?" Feng Na smiled bitterly and said, "She's playing Zhao Ling, Do you think we can replace her?" Li Yundong was shocked. "No way. The lead actor is not here yet?" But then he comforted her and said, "It's okay. There are still 4 or 5 hours before the show starts. It's still early. They will come." Feng Na smiled bitterly and said, "That's the only way to think." With that, she turned to the actors backstage and said, "Come on, let's get to know each other. The most important minor character of this play is finally here. Let's welcome the Sword Sage." The actors backstage had already recognized the famous figures of the school, and they all applauded and laughed. They glanced at Li Yundong and naturally saw Zi Yuan, who was not far away from him. They were all shocked by her ethereal temperament and beautiful appearance and felt ashamed of their inferiority. Li Yundong smiled at the crowd and said, "I'm just here to be a bystander. You guys go on." Feng Na pulled over the girl who had spoken at the beginning and said with a smile, "This is Yu Lu, the actress who plays Lin Yueru." Yu Lu was beautiful. Although she was not as good as Feng Na and could not be compared with Zhou Qin and the others, she was still above average. She shook hands with Li Yundong generously and said, "Let's shake hands." Li Yundong deliberately put on a straight face and shook hands with her with a serious expression. Yu Lu giggled and said, "Sword Sage, please be merciful." Li Yundong waved his hand and sighed with a face full of vicissitudes. "I have sealed my sword for many years. Is there anyone in the world who is worthy of my hand?" His deliberately showing off made everyone in the backstage laugh. Zhou Qin, Feng Na, and the others covered their mouths and laughed. Ruan Hongling laughed and said, "Bah, you're really boasting. You don't even know how to control a sword, but you dare to say that you have sealed your sword? You're so shameless." Zi Yuan, who was standing to one side, couldn't help smiling when she heard Li Yundong's words, but when she heard Ruan Hongling's words, she immediately glared at her. Ruan Hongling knew that she had spilled the beans and immediately stuck out her tongue. Feng Na laughed for a while and introduced the other characters in the play. The one who played Li Xiaoyao was the boy who had worn a cyan headscarf and pretended to be dressed up. His name was Zhong Xiugua, and he was handsome, comparable to Hu Gu. But to Li Yundong's surprise, the one who played Gai Luojiao turned out to be Jiang Xiuxiu, who had made a big mistake before. When Jiang Xiuxiu saw Li Yundong looking at her, she greeted him embarrassedly and then found an excuse to hide in the crowd. Li Yundong felt a little funny in his heart. He smiled at Feng Na and said, "I remember that Gai Luojiao's role should be the most important, right? Can Jiang Xiuxiu do it?" Feng Na smiled and said, "She is an acting major, and her lines are very good. Don't look down on her." Li Yundong smiled and said, "How dare I look down on professionals? However, if I want to play the Sword Sage, you have to give me a prop, right? You can't let me go on stage empty-handed, can you?" Feng Na giggled and said, "I've already thought about this." After that, she called to the backstage, "Yan Hua, bring the sword over." As soon as he heard the name, Li Yundong immediately asked in confusion, "Have you made up with him?" Feng Na smiled and said, "Comrade Li Yundong, the president of the student union must be tolerant. I made him the vice president of the student union. Li Yundong cupped his hands and said, I admire you. The president is really a prime minister. You're amazing. After a while, Yan Hua came over with a long sword in his arms. He looked at Li Yundong with vigilance and hostility and snorted. Don't break my sword. As he said this, he took out the sword, but it was not for Li Yundong, but for Feng Na. Li Yundong laughed in his heart, this boy is really petty. Feng Na took the long sword and said with a smile, what kind of family heirloom is this? Is it so important? Ruan Hongling, who was standing to one side, saw the sword and suddenly widened her eyes. She cried out involuntarily, Yan Hua, did you steal your family heirloom? Yan Hua's face turned red. He braced himself and said, what do you mean by stealing? Isn't what belongs to my family also mine? Ruan Hongling turned her head and looked at Zi Yuan in shock. Sister Zi Yuan, isn't this? Zi Yuan shook her head at her, signaling for her to stop talking. Ruan Hongling's heart trembled and she swallowed the rest of her words. Although the others had only seen the antique sword, there was nothing extraordinary about it. Naturally, they didn't know what was so important about what Ruan Hongling hadn't said. But Li Yundong paid attention to it. He walked over to Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling and asked in a low voice, what did you just say? What's wrong with this sword? Ruan Hongling looked at Zi Yuan. Seeing Zi Yuan nod, she looked at the sword and said in a low voice, this is the Liuhe, the sword of my second Shibwa. It and my master's Bahuang sword, which is the Bahuang sword in Ao Wushuang's hand, were originally a pair of swords. Your second Shibwa's sword? Li Yundong was shocked. He suddenly looked at Yan Hua and said, is he also a cultivator? No way. Tomorrow at the third watch of the night, /om/. Chapter 232. Go to Watch Network. When Ruan Hongling heard Li Yundong's words, she sneered and said, him? What kind of cultivator is this guy with great ambition but little talent? However, there was indeed a cultivator in his family, but no one in the family knew about it, not even Yan Hua. This sword belongs to Yan Hua's aunt, who is also my second Shibwa. My second Shibwa met my master when she was 14 years old, and then she became a monk with him. 9 years ago, she went to the Fox Zen school to make trouble for Ao Wushuang, and then her whereabouts were unknown. Listening to this past, she couldn't help but show a look of vicissitudes of life in her eyes. I didn't expect that I would see my master's Bahuang sword 2 months ago, and now I see my second Shibwa's Liuhe sword here. Could this be a coincidence? Li Yundong asked in confusion, why is your second Shibwa's sword in Yan Hua's hand? Ruan Hongling snorted and said, second Shibwa didn't take her sword with her before she left. She left it in the Yan family and just told us to keep an eye on it. One day, she would take it back. Li Yundong was about to speak when he saw Feng Na walking over and asking curiously, what are you talking about? Li Yundong turned around and said with a smile, nothing, we're talking about this sword. Feng Na handed the sword in her hand to Li Yundong. Here, your prop sword. Li Yundong took the sword and looked at it while asking, why did you think of asking Yan Hua for this sword as a prop? Feng Na smiled and said, I just asked if anyone had a classical sword to use as a prop, and Yan Hua volunteered. Li Yundong suddenly understood. He stroked the scabbard of the sword with his hand and felt that it was delicate and soft. Ruan Hongling said, the scabbard of this sword is made of shark skin. Its surface is smooth and hard, and it's very wear-resistant. Li Yundong nodded. His fingers swept to the hilt of the sword, and he saw a fine pattern engraved on the edge of the sword. It looked like a very special rune or character. Li Yundong pressed his hand on the hilt of the sword and immediately felt a hidden power in the sword stirring. Li Yundong's heart trembled. He took a deep breath and pulled out the Liuhe with a clang. In an instant, the treasured sword was unsheathed. The body of the sword emitted a faint light and a buzzing sound, like the cry of a dragon and the cry of a phoenix. Except for Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling, the surrounding people were all surprised. Feng Na even cried out involuntarily, "Is this the legendary sword recognizing its master?" This was too amazing. How could it call out? "Li Yundong, how did you do it?" Yan Hua stared at Li Yundong with his eyes wide open, feeling annoyed and angry. Why does this guy always want to be in the limelight? Damn it, this is my family's sword. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have brought it. But he couldn't go back on his word now. He was so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices, and his nose was almost crooked. Seeing that he was looking at the sword obsessively, she nodded to him and said, "Li Yundong, come here. I have something to say to you. Watch net." Li Yundong nodded and put away the long sword. As soon as the liuhe was sheathed, the light and buzzing sound immediately disappeared, making the students backstage click their tongues in wonder. Zi Yuan walked to a corner and whispered to Li Yundong, "Li Yundong, this is my second Shirbua's sword. I hope you can use it well." Li Yundong laughed and said, "What, are you afraid that I'll take it for myself? Don't worry, I have the fan of 7 treasures. I won't swallow your second Shirbua's sword. Besides, isn't it Yan Hua's?" Zi Yuan shook her head and said, "No, since this sword has fallen into your hands, it must have been arranged by fate." Li Yundong couldn't help laughing when he heard this. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly thought of something. No wonder Wan Hongling and Yan Hua have such a good relationship. It turns out that they can be said to be friends. The two of them came to this school together, and in the end, this sword fell into my hands because of chance. Although I only borrowed it temporarily, it can't be said to be predestined. As Li Yundong thought about it, he suddenly felt as if there was really an invisible hand in this world pulling the invisible thread between people. He couldn't help but be a little dazed. After a while, he came to his senses and looked a little solemn. "I see. I will keep it for your second Shirbua." Zi Yuan opened her mouth and was about to speak when they suddenly heard a noise coming from backstage. The two of them turned their heads and saw a girl stumbling into the backstage. Some people cheered. Okay, she's finally here." Feng Na also went up to greet her. She saw that the girl's hair was disheveled, her steps were weak, and her body was full of a strong smell of cigarettes and alcohol. She immediately covered her nose and frowned. "Lu Ling, what have you been doing?" Lu Ling, who was playing Zhao Linger, raised her head, giggled, and said with a big tongue, I'm sorry. I played too much, hee hee." Seeing Lu Ling's appearance, Feng Na frowned more and more. "What's wrong with you? Did you know that there's a performance today?" Lu Ling frowned and said unhappily, "What's wrong? Don't we still have 4 hours?" Feng Na had just become the president of the student union, and it was the first time she had organized such an important program since she was elected. Now she had encountered such a thing. She could imagine how unhappy she was. She suppressed her anger and said, "So many people are waiting for you. Don't you feel embarrassed? You're performing tonight, and you've made yourself look like this. You don't look like a human, and you don't look like a ghost. Don't you feel embarrassed?" Lu Ling stood up and said loudly, "What's wrong with me? Is my current appearance not good?" After saying that, she pushed her hair back. When the people around saw this, there was an uproar. Watch net. 7ko/Li Yundong took a look and immediately thought to himself, "Oh my god, how is this Zhao Linger?" This was clearly not mainstream. The makeup on Lu Ling's face was like a pot of colorful ink splashed on her face. Her eyes were as black as a panda's, and her lips were painted with purple lipstick. She really looked like a demon. Not to mention Zhao Ling, even if she was playing the role of the kitchen god, she would look a bit fierce. The other actors in the show were not happy, and they all criticized, "Lu Ling, what are you doing? Look at you. Do you look like a human? Did you take drugs yesterday? Why do you look like this? Hey, how are you going to perform later? Aren't you going to die?" Feng Na was furious. "Lu Ling, go look at yourself in the mirror. Look at yourself now. Can you perform? Write a self-reflection after the performance." Lu Ling shook her head and snorted. "Yes, of course I can. I am fine, aren't I? You want me to write a self-reflection? Humph, I won't write it. If you have the ability, then don't ask me to perform." Feng Na was furious. "If you don't want to act, then don't. Even a pig would be more suitable to play Zhao Linger." Lu Ling said angrily, Fine, I'll leave now. I'll see who you find to play Zhao Linger." She turned around and left. Feng Na sneered. "Zhao Linger is not a stutterer." Lu Ling turned around and was about to retort when she suddenly twisted her foot. With a scream, she fell down the stairs backstage. Suddenly, there was an uproar backstage. The students rushed over. Feng Na hurriedly ordered a student, "Send her to the hospital." "What the hell?" Cheng Cheng watched as the male student supported Lu Ling, who was crying and holding her ankle. "Nana," she said worriedly, "there are only 4 hours left. What should we do?" Feng Na's face darkened. She hadn't expected that such a thing would happen. She was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan as she paced around the backstage. The other students were also discussing and whispering to each other. Their topics revolved around what had just happened, but most of them were discussing who would play the role of Zhao Linger. Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly at Feng Na. "Feng Na, why did you find Lu Ling, a non-mainstream actress, to play Zhao Linger? That's not the way to make a breakthrough, is it?" Feng Na smiled bitterly. "Oh my God, don't tease me. I'm in a hurry. Lu Ling used to be pretty good. She was a pretty girl. Who knew that she would play so crazily?" Li Yundong sighed. "I'm not being sarcastic, but where are you going to find an actress to play Zhao Linger? You know, the actress is beautiful, but the most important thing is that she has a fresh and clean temperament." Hearing this, Feng Na glanced at Zhou Qin with a sad face and said, "Actually, Zhou Qin's acting is quite good, but now she..." Zhou Qin had been sitting quietly in her wheelchair and watching the crowd. When she saw Feng Na looking at her, she spread her hands and made a helpless gesture. Feng Na rubbed her temples with a bitter smile and murmured to herself, "Who should I find?" While she was worrying, she suddenly shouted, "I know who to find." Then, she looked in a direction. Her shout immediately attracted everyone backstage to look at her. Then, their gazes followed her gaze in unison. Li Yundong couldn't help but follow their gazes. He saw Zi Yuan standing in the center of everyone's attention with a confused face, at a loss. "She will play Zhao Linger? Good. Li Yundong laughed out loud and said the word "good" 3 times in a row. Ruan Hongling also looked at Zi Yuan curiously. She was also amused and said with a smile, "Sister Zi Yuan, you are quite suitable to play Zhao Linger. But you are a little more mature than Zhao Linger, and your temperament is definitely good enough." Zi Yuan glared at Ruan Hongling. "You are so rude. How dare you make fun of your Shiji?" Ruan Hongling giggled and said, "Sister Zi Yuan, I was right. Don't you see that so many people are looking at you? This is what everyone expects of you." Feng Na also came over and smiled apologetically. "Well, may I know your name? How should I address you?" Zi Yuan glanced at her faintly and said, "I don't dare. Just call me Zi Yuan." Zi Yuan's gaze made Feng Na feel ashamed of her inferiority. She subconsciously wanted to turn around and leave. She felt that standing in front of Ziyuan was like an ugly duckling standing in front of a white swan. She was also a beauty, but compared with Ziyuan, it was like heaven and earth. However, Feng Na had an important task to do, so she could only bite the bullet and say with a smile, "Well, Sister Ziyuan, as you can see, we are in urgent need of an important role. I think you are the most suitable. What do you think?" Without hesitation, Ziyuan said, "No way." Feng Na suddenly choked, and the smile on her face froze. She was complaining in her heart, but when she saw Li Yundong snickering, she suddenly became angry. She kicked Li Yundong's calf and said fiercely, "Hey, help me." Li Yundong dodged the kick and said to Feng Na with a smile, "Go do your thing. I will persuade her." Feng Na lowered her voice and said, "Hey, you must get it done, or I will die miserably." Li Yundong waved at her and said, "Go ahead." Li Yundong drove Feng Na away, then turned around and said to Ziyuan while holding back his laughter, "Hey, are you really not going to act?" It was rare for Ziyuan to show her feminine side. She rolled her eyes at Li Yundong and said, "Do you really want to see me make a fool of myself?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Didn't you say that cultivators have to taste all kinds of things in the world? Now the opportunity has come. In a while, you will be able to taste what it feels like to stand under the colorful lights on the stage and receive the attention of thousands of people. This will definitely help your cultivation." Ruan Hongling, who was standing to one side, couldn't help but admire Li Yundong in her heart. This guy is really good at talking. He is targeting my Shiji's weakness. Sure enough, Ziyuan hesitated for a moment and asked, "Will this be useful?" Li Yundong pretended to be elegant. He drew a sword flower with the long sword in his hand and then made a very cool pose. He sighed and said, "If you don't experience a big scene, how can you say that you have walked in the world? How can you say that your Taoist heart is as stable as a rock?" Ziyuan's heart skipped a beat. She asked Ruan Hongling, "Then who is Zhao Linger?" Seeing that Ziyuan had agreed, Ruan Hongling immediately shouted excitedly, "Sister Ziyuan, you agree?" Ziyuan glared at her and said, "You just want to see the world in chaos." Ruan Hongling giggled and explained Zhao Linger and the legend of the sword and fairy to her Shiji, who had been cultivating all year round. Ziyuan thought for a moment and sighed. "Since I'm here, I'll take it easy. Well, I'll act. What do you need me to do?" Hearing this, Ruan Hongling was so excited that she jumped 3 feet high. "Great, there's a good show to watch." Ziyuan looked at her with a mixture of anger and amusement, then asked Li Yundong, "By the way, what are you going to play?" Li Yundong put the long sword in his hand behind his back, made a finger gesture, and said arrogantly, "I will play the role of the sword sage who snatched you away from Li Xiaoyao, the version of the legend of the sword and fairy, Wang Hu." After that, he laughed proudly, as if it was a very happy thing to see Ziyuan suffer a setback. Let's go out to eat and release the first chapter in advance, /om/. Chapter 233. Go to watch net. When Feng Na saw that Ziyuan had agreed to play Zhao Linger, she was overjoyed. She laughed proudly and said, "With this fairy sister joining us, our show will be shocking." Li Yundong laughed and scolded, "Is this a beauty pageant?" Feng Na made a face at him and said, "You don't understand. It's an eye-catching economy now." Then, she said to the crowd in a low voice, "This fairy sister will play Zhao Linger. Do you have any objections?" Everyone laughed and said loudly, "No." But one of the boys shouted, "I have an objection." Everyone looked at him in unison and saw that it was Zhong Xiugua, who was playing Li Xiaoyao. He said with a depressed expression, "I feel a lot of pressure to be paired with such a beautiful woman." The surrounding students immediately jeered, "TSK. If you can't do it, hurry up and come down. There are plenty of people who want to play. That's right, it's a blessing in disguise. Zhong Xiaogua glanced at Zi Yuan and felt that this girl had a noble aura that was simply unattainable. Not to mention standing in front of her and acting, even looking at her would make his heart beat wildly for a long time. He smiled bitterly and said, "Whoever wants to play can play it." When Feng Na saw that the male lead actually wanted to quit, she quickly coaxed him, "Don't. How difficult is it to get such a good opportunity? Zhong Xiaogua, you are a film and television performance major. Did you go to class for nothing? How are you going to act in the future? Don't worry. When this beautiful woman changes into her costume, you'll feel like you're on the scene." Zhong Xiaogua muttered a few words. No one knew what he had said, but at least he stopped talking about quitting. Feng Na spent a lot of time dealing with these people, but she was so tired that she was sweating profusely. Li Yundong took the paper she handed over and glanced at it for a while. He saw that there were very few lines on it. The main thing was to go out and put on a few poses. After that, he would snatch away the beautiful Zhao Linger, and it would be a success. After taking a few glances and memorizing the lines, Li Yundong focused his attention on the Liuhe sword. He tried to transfer his Jinqi into the sword and immediately felt a strong force rebound. This force was soft and lingering, but there was a feeling of hidden needles in its softness. From time to time, it pricked Li Yundong's fingertips. There was hardness in softness, and yang in yin. Obviously, it was the Dharma power and Jinqi left by a master. Watch net. Net. Super_speed. More. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, and he didn't dare to try again for a while. Otherwise, there would be a flying sword battle that was comparable to computer special effects. Time passed quickly, and before they knew it, it was already night. More and more actors were gathering backstage in the auditorium. After Li Yundong and the others had a boxed lunch backstage, he saw that the auditorium was already full of people, so he pushed Zhou Qin off the stage and told Cheng Cheng to take care of her. Only then did he return backstage. When he returned to the backstage, he saw Feng Na waving at him. Hey, come over here. Get your makeup done. I've been looking for you." Li Yundong was stunned and pointed at himself. "I need to put on makeup?" Feng Na was familiar with him, so she didn't stand on ceremony. She walked behind him, pushed him to the dressing table, and then pressed him to sit down. "Nonsense, who doesn't need makeup on stage? If you don't put on makeup, you'll look like a zombie in the light." After Li Yundong sat down, he looked up and saw a very feminine man walking over with a makeup box in his hand. Before he got close, he could smell a strong smell of makeup. Li Yundong was shocked and thought to himself, "This guy is not a makeup artist. This guy is not a makeup artist." The man walked up to him, stretched out his orchid-shaped fingers, and pinched a piece of powder in his hand. He said with a sweet smile, "Oh, it's my honor to be able to put on makeup for the sword sage." Li Yundong's hair stood on end, and he thought to himself, "Damn, this guy is really a makeup artist." Feng Na burst into laughter. She patted Li Yundong on the shoulder and said, "Just enjoy it." Seeing that she was about to turn around and leave, Li Yundong didn't even have time to call out to her. He could only smile bitterly and say to the trap, "Miss, please be merciful." The trap smiled sweetly and said, "I wouldn't dare to be ruthless towards Sir Sword Sage. Otherwise, if Sir Sword Sage were to stab me with his sword, I wouldn't be able to bear it." If this was really said by a beautiful woman, then it could also be regarded as sexual harassment, and Li Yundong could reluctantly accept it. But if it was said by a man, then Li Yundong felt cold all over. He smiled dryly and didn't dare to speak again. He closed his eyes and stretched out his neck, ready to die a heroic death. Go to the internet. 7 KOM On one side, some girls who had already put on makeup surrounded Li Yundong and watched him put on makeup. The girls who usually didn't dare to look at him now dared to point at him and make comments. About half an hour later, Li Yundong could already hear the program starting backstage. Next to him, the trap said, "Well, let's watch." Only then did Li Yundong dare to open his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw a white-haired man with an old face in the mirror in front of him. His cheeks were thin to begin with. At this time, after putting on makeup, the hair on both sides fell down again, making his temperament even more like an unsheathed sharp sword, extremely cold and outstanding. The surrounding girls sighed. At this time, Feng Na also came over and looked at Li Yundong carefully, then gave the trap a thumbs up and said, "Not bad, you really have some skills." As she said this, she pushed Li Yundong into the dressing room again. "Hurry up, go and change into your costume. It's all ready for you." Li Yundong was manipulated by her like a puppet, so he had no choice but to enter the dressing room. When he came out after changing his clothes, the people around him immediately cheered when they saw him. Li Yundong had a head full of white hair and a 2-inch white beard. His long hair trailed over his shoulders, and he wore a long robe that was whiter than snow. On his back was a sword with a red tassel hanging from it. Standing there, he gave off the feeling of a towering mountain. Everyone felt that the person standing in front of them was not a college student, but a sword immortal great grandmaster that only existed in games. Ordinary people would inevitably have an indescribable feeling when dressed in this way, but when Li Yundong wore it, he gave people a strong classical and cold beauty, as if he had really walked out of a game. "Damn!" Feng Na gasped. Even she had not expected that Li Yundong would be able to play the temperament of a sword sage so perfectly. She stammered, "If you participate in SPLY, you will definitely win first place." Li Yundong didn't answer. He just glanced at her from the corner of his eye. His eyes were full of vicissitudes and coldness, as if he had seen all the love and hatred in the world. Feng Na shuddered at Li Yundong's gaze. What kind of gaze is that, she thought. He is obviously a college student younger than me. Why does he have such vicissitudes and cold eyes? This kind of gaze can't be faked. What on earth has he experienced? Li Yundong glanced at Feng Na and snorted. He lifted his robe and sat down on a stool, thinking to himself, "This B*TCH is really good at manipulating this old man. If I don't teach you a lesson, you won't know what a sword sage is." His arrogance were really no different from that of a sword sage. Some of the performing arts students nearby were stunned. Jiang Xiuxiu, who was playing the role of Guy Luojiao, stared at Li Yundong with wide eyes. Did he study acting before? How can he act so vividly? Feng Na saw that Li Yundong seemed to be immersed in the role ahead of time. She rolled her eyes, then came behind Li Yundong and called out to a classmate, "Hey, hurry up and take a picture of me and Lord Sword Sage." As she said this, she made a V-shaped gesture and grinned. That student was also quick-witted. He took out his camera and snapped a photo. With Feng Na's lead, the students in the backstage immediately burst into an uproar. They crowded in front of the sword saint and posed for all kinds of PSS photos. Li Yundong was depressed. "Well, they actually used me as a prop to take a photo." While he was feeling depressed, he saw a girl who was squatting next to him and was pretending to be a non-mainstream pout. She turned around and said angrily, "Lord Sword Sage, please smile, okay?" Li Yundong let out a long sigh, stroked his beard, and said, "You all take photos of me as a scenery and don't give me a dime after the photo. How can I smile?" The students around him laughed. "Lord Sword Sage, how much does it cost to take one photo? 2 yuan a time? Damn, isn't it too cheap? It should be at least 3 yuan. 3 yuan? Well, I'll take 10 photos." Let me ask weekly, how much is a monthly package? A monthly package? Damn, I'm a VIP package for the whole year. The veins on Li Yundong's forehead twitched when he heard this. A bunch of B** starts. Just as they were making a fuss, they suddenly heard an uproar coming from a corner of the backstage. Everyone's eyes immediately turned to look. Zi Yuan was wearing a blue and white gown and a pair of navy blue trousers. She walked out of the changing room gracefully. Her hair was in 2 braids, and there was an ethereal aura in her purity. Her dark eyes were ethereal and deep, making people feel calm and serene at first glance. Li Yundong was also stunned. He thought to himself, this is the enhanced version of Zhao Linger. The ethereal aura on Zi Yuan's body is too strong. It lacks the childishness that Zhao Linger should have at this time, but it has more of an immortal aura. Wherever Zi Yuan went, the sound disappeared. Everyone stared blankly at the woman who had walked from the sky to the mortal world. When Zi Yuan walked to Li Yundong's side, she suddenly lowered her voice and said to Li Yundong, "Do I look strange? Why are they all staring at me?" Li Yundong almost laughed out loud. "It's not strange. It's very good. They're all looking at you because you are so beautiful." Zi Yuan's cheeks turned slightly red. She was about to speak again, but she saw the people next to her pointing at her and Li Yundong. They whispered to each other, "Hey, do you find that when these 2 people stand together, their temperament is very compatible?" Well, indeed, they are both immortal figures. When they stand together, they are really blessed by immortals. Ordinary people like us can't compare. I envy them so much. But their ages don't match, do they? Idiot, we're talking about temperament. Besides, isn't it very popular for old couples to have young wives now? When Zi Yuan heard this, her Taoist heart was slightly disturbed for a moment, and her face became more and more flushed. At first, Zhong Xiugua, who was playing Li Xiaoyao, felt very ashamed when he saw Zi Yuan, but when he heard this, he thought to himself, no matter what, she is now my Linger. Li Yundong was also very embarrassed when he heard this. He coughed dryly and was about to change the topic when he suddenly saw Wan Hongling rush into the backstage from the stage. She said to Zi Yuan with a smile on her face, "Sister Zi Yuan, I've finished my performance. It's your turn to go on stage." As she spoke, she rolled her eyes and whispered to Li Yundong, "Hey, I'll take care of your fan of 7 treasures for you. Don't hold my sister Zi Yuan back when you go on stage later." Li Yundong laughed and said in a low voice, "I'm afraid that she will hold me back." Wan Hongling rolled her eyes at him and didn't say anything else. Feng Na was shocked. "It's our turn to go on stage?" She stood up, glanced at the program list, and slapped her thigh. D****, it's a mess. Comrades, it's time to go on stage. Get ready. The students backstage who were going on stage in a while answered loudly. They tidied up their clothes one after another. Taking advantage of the lights being turned off on the stage, the actors who had scenes to play at the beginning filed in. Not long after, the heavy curtain slowly opened, and the dazzling light shone on the stage. The most anticipated drama of Tiannan University had begun. /om/ Chapter 234. Go to watch net. The Sword Sage, played by Li Yundong, appeared at the end of the play. Before he appeared, he had been standing behind the curtain and watching the play on the stage. Go to watch net. 7K O Hong O MIT had to be said that Feng Na had chosen the play very well. After her modification, this play reflected the tension of a literary play and the fiery and wonderful action play. Moreover, she was temporarily the president of the Taekwondo club, so it was very convenient and easy for her to transfer a few experts from the club to act as extras and action guides. This play was about Li Xiaoyao and Lin Yueru following Zhao Linger's footsteps all the way. They happened to meet Guy Luojiao and Elder Shi, who had taken Zhao Linger away. The two sides fought fiercely, and Elder Shi was outnumbered. In the end, he blew himself up and died with everyone. At this time, the sword sage happened to pass by and saw Zhao Linger. Seeing that she was a demon soul and a human body, and seeing the corpses all over the ground, he thought that she had killed them, so he took her away in anger. In order to make this play more tense, Feng Na modified the part where Li Xiaoyao and Lin Yueru were knocked out by Guy Luojiao. In the end, it was changed to Li Xiaoyao did not faint, and the sword sage forcibly took Zhao Linger away. Li Xiaoyao fought with the sword sage head-on and was defeated without any suspense. In the end, he looked at Zhao Linger across the air and shed tears on the stage. Thinking of this play, Li Yundong felt strange in his heart. He thought to himself, why does this play seem so much like Ao Wushuang taking my girl away? It's not so appropriate, is it? Is Feng Na doing this on purpose or is it just a coincidence? While he was muttering in his heart, he saw that the fight between Guy Luojiao and Elder Shi had already begun on the stage. This fight was also designed in accordance with the rules. When had the students under the stage seen such a play with swords and swords? All of them cheered and cheered to their heart's content. In the end, Elder Shi was outnumbered. After saying a few words, all the lights on the stage suddenly lit up, so that everyone couldn't help but cover their eyes. Suddenly, all the lights went out, and the stage was dark. At this time, Li Yundong knew that Elder Shi had perished together with everyone. It was time for him to appear. The news that the legend of the sword and fairy was going to be performed at the freshman welcoming party had spread throughout the school a few days ago. Many people were focused on how Li Yundong would play the role of the sword saint, but they were more interested in how the fight would be handled, especially when Elder Shi self-destructed. Everyone wanted to know how to perform on stage. Many people even debated about it on the school forum, but most of them didn't come to a conclusion. But at this time, seeing that Feng Na handled the scene so cleverly, those who knew the ropes immediately cheered, while those who did not know the ropes inevitably felt a little disappointed. One by one, they craned their necks to look at the dark stage, eagerly waiting for the sword saint to appear. Watch net. 7 KOM. Sure enough, before long, a beam of light suddenly fell from above and shone on Li Yundong's body. As soon as Li Yundong appeared, his strong aura and temperament, which was extremely close to the sword saint's, immediately attracted the students under the stage to shout excitedly. Even Li Yundong himself hadn't expected that as soon as he appeared on the stage, there would be a tsunami of applause, cheers, shouts, and all kinds of things. It was like a noisy torrent rushing to the stage, so much so that he couldn't even hear his own lines. For a moment, the actors on the stage and Feng Na and the others backstage all felt their hearts skip a beat. They thought to themselves, what should we do? This is going to be an awkward silence. Fortunately, Li Yundong had an idea. He backhandedly took out the sword on his back, and then pulled out half of it with a clang. In an instant, the sword was out of the box. Li Yundong used his qi, and suddenly the Liuhe let out a sword cry like a dragon's roar, which resounded through the auditorium. Although everyone's voices were loud, they couldn't cover this sound. Everyone was surprised and couldn't help but stop. They all stared at the stage with wide eyes. The auditorium suddenly fell silent. The students under the stage thought that this had been deliberately arranged and that the sound had been recorded and played through the loudspeaker, but the actors on the stage and the backstage staff knew that this was all caused by Li Yundong. After Li Yundong showed his skills and stunned the students under the stage, he glanced around and said coldly and majestically to Zhao Linger, "Did you kill all these people?" Zi Yuan was naturally intelligent. She was also very into the role and denied it in panic. She shook her head and stepped back. Her appearance made the boys below the stage feel pity for her. They wished they could step forward and stand up for her. Li Yundong snorted coldly. There are corpses all over the ground, and you are the only one around. If it wasn't you, then who killed them? You devil, how dare you deny it? As he said this, Li Yundong was about to step forward according to the script. At this time, Li Xiaoyao rushed out to protect Zhao Linger and shouted, "She didn't kill them. I can testify." Li Yundong snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves, and shook Li Xiaoyao off. "Ignorant boy, get out of my way." As he said this, he reached out to grab Zhao Linger. At this time, Li Xiaoyao pulled out his long sword with a clang and shouted at Li Yundong, who was playing the role of the sword sage, "Look at the sword." At this moment, a sudden change occurred. The liuha behind Li Yundong suddenly made a clanging sound and suddenly came out of the sheath. The long sword emitted a faint brilliance, and the sword body floated in the air, making a clear sword sound. Go to the net. 7 KOM. Net. Super_speed. More. New. The magical item was psychic, and it also had similar feelings as human beings. The long sword let out a long cry, and Li Yundong clearly heard it. He could clearly hear the joy of a servant seeing its master, as well as the excitement and emotion of reuniting after a long time. Before Li Yundong could react, Zi Yuan's expression suddenly changed dramatically. Her figure suddenly flashed, and in an instant, she jumped in front of Li Yundong. With her back facing him, she faced an empty space on the stage. She slapped out her palm and shouted, "Appear." There was a faint green light in her hand, and she slapped it in front of her. With a buzzing sound, the surrounding air was compressed, and in an instant, countless golden hairpins suddenly appeared in the air, piercing through the air and fiercely stabbing towards her. Zi Yuan pushed Li Yundong away and said quickly, "Go and get the liuha." After that, a purple ribbon suddenly appeared in her hand. She turned her wrist, and the purple ribbon immediately began to spin rapidly. As she spun, she retreated. The purple ribbon was pulled into a spiral cone, and in the middle of the cone were sharp golden hairpins. These golden hairpins were like a school of fish in a fishing net in the entanglement of the purple ribbon. They no longer had any power and could only struggle helplessly. Zi Yuan used this purple ribbon to forcibly slow down the sharp stab of these golden hairpins. She suddenly opened her eyes, and there was a flash of light in them. She slapped at the golden hairpins that had appeared out of nowhere and shouted, "Break." With a clattering sound, these golden hairpins, which had lost their momentum, were immediately blown back by her. However, when they flew into the air, they formed a 5-inch-long phoenix tail golden hairpin. Zi Yuan stared at the golden hairpin floating in the air with vigilance. She took a deep breath and was shocked in her heart. Is this the threaded hairpin of soul traversal of Mo Ashi of the Fox Zen school? How could it be here? Zi Yuan had pushed Li Yundong away in a hurry, but she had pushed him off the stage. Just as Li Yundong was about to fall off the stage, he suddenly twisted his waist and spun his heels on the edge of the stage. His whole body turned over like a hawk, and his posture was extremely elegant. He stopped falling and stabilized himself on the stage. After he stabilized his body, he stamped his feet and grabbed the liuha floating in the air like a bolt of lightning. As soon as the liuha was held by Li Yundong, it struggled frantically. Li Yundong only felt an extremely powerful force coming from his hand. This force shook him so much that he could hardly hold the hilt of the sword with his 5 fingers. The long sword was about to fall out of his hand. It was as if he had grabbed a primitive beast, an ancient monster that he could not control at all. The liuha was buzzing, and the sound of the sword resounded through the auditorium. Suddenly, the liuha shook violently and broke free from Li Yundong's 5 fingers. The tip of the sword suddenly swung and stabbed toward Li Yundong's throat. This sudden attack came without warning. Li Yundong was shocked, but it was not the first time he had suddenly encountered a life-and-death situation. Without thinking, he flicked the finger of his right hand toward the blade of the sword and firmly flicked it. With a clang, the liuhe was bounced askew, and the sharp blade brushed past Li Yundong's neck. When Li Yundong's neck was brushed by the blade, he suddenly got goosebumps all over his body. At this moment, he felt that death had brushed past him. What's going on? Who wants to kill me? Li Yundong was shocked and angry. He reacted quickly. When the liuhe passed by him, he grabbed the hilt of the sword with his hand. As soon as his fingers touched the hilt, he felt the long sword suddenly turn and the blade cut toward his neck. Li Yundong was shocked. He flipped in the air and shrank his head. The long sword was close to his head. Then, he took advantage of the momentum of flipping in the air and gave a loud shout. He stabbed the liuhe into the floor of the stage. With a thud, the liuhe was stabbed into the floor like a sword in the stone. Only half of the sword was exposed. It was buzzing and trembling, as if it was trying to struggle out of the ground. Li Yundong had the experience of taming magic weapons, so he immediately poured the huge zhenqi in his body into the liuhe. As he poured it in, the liuhe suddenly struggled more and more. The faint light on the sword turned into an obvious white light, and the floor of the stage was buzzing and trembling. The huge yuanyang zhenqi in Li Yundong's body fought fiercely with the liuhe's own magic power and zhenqi. This zhenqi was a combination of yin and yang, and it was extremely powerful. Li Yundong could resist the yang qi in it, but he couldn't stand the cold yin qi that was like gossamer and pricked him from time to time. While the two forces were in a stalemate, a drop of blood suddenly dripped from Li Yundong's neck where the blade had brushed past. The drop of blood fell on the hilt of the sword. Suddenly, Li Yundong heard a shrill sword cry from the liuhe, and the resistance inside the sword instantly weakened a little. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly remembered what Su Chan had said to him after he had broken Ruan Hongling's magic weapon with his bare hands. The blood of a virgin's yuanyang is the most yang in the world, and it specializes in breaking all the yin qi in the world. Li Yundong immediately took a deep breath, loosened one hand, and wiped the wound on his neck with his finger. Then, he wiped the blade of the liuhe with his bloody finger from top to bottom. Suddenly, the liuhe let out a tragic cry, and the sword trembled violently. Then, Li Yundong felt that the soft and tenacious resistance inside had suddenly disappeared, and his yuanyang power had broken into the blade of the liuhe like a hot knife through butter. In the blink of an eye, the zhenqi of the original owner of the sword had been completely broken by Li Yundong. The liuhe in Li Yundong's hand suddenly quieted down, as gentle and docile as a virgin. With a thought, he pulled out the long sword with a swish. With a clang, the blood on the liuhe quickly merged into it, leaving a looming character on the sword, and then disappeared in a flash. After being subdued by Li Yundong, the liuhe let out a clear and loud sword cry again. The sword suddenly emitted a dazzling light, and the sword qi soared into the sky. It was so amazing that it shocked people's hearts. From the sudden attack of the threaded hairpin of soul traversal and the liuhe to Zi Yuan dispersing the attack of the threaded hairpin of soul traversal, and then Li Yundong subdued the liuhe, all of this happened in the blink of an eye. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan moved as fast as lightning. The actors on the stage were stunned, and the students below the stage were in an uproar. All the audience stood up in an uproar. They shouted in shock, F***ck, isn't this too exaggerated? What kind of stunt is this? There are always some children who ask me at night, Tang Tang, why did you only update once today? Why didn't you update today? Tang Tang replied speechlessly, boss, I update at least 2 times a day. This is unchangeable. From time to time, I will update 3 times. I know that some children like to save the table of contents of books and then read the updated chapters there. I do the same. But sometimes the display of the chapter table of contents is delayed, sometimes delayed by a few hours. I can't help it. I suggest that you spend some effort to register and then click on the collection button. In the future, you can see the latest updates on your bookshelf every day. My update time is around 14 o'clock at noon and 21 o'clock at night. If the 3 chapters are around 14 o'clock, 18 o'clock, and 21 o'clock respectively. Please, everyone, you can see the updates as soon as possible. You can also register an account and throw flowers to Tang Tang. When the time comes, maybe Tang Tang will release 1 or 2 more chapters. Why not? /om/. Chapter 235. Go to Watch Network. The sudden abnormality on the stage caused an uproar in the auditorium. Most of the people below the stage had not reacted yet. They thought that it was a deliberately arranged effect, so they were so shocked that they shouted and shouted. Watch net. A small number of students felt that something was wrong. They said loudly, "How did Zhao Linger become a friend of the Sword Sage? Isn't this too ridiculous? Zhao Linger betrayed him. Damn, who wrote this script? So non-mainstream? Isn't this too postmodernist? How did the Sword Sage get together with Zhao Linger? Damn, isn't this Li Xiaoyao too tragic? This Sword Sage is too handsome. If I were Zhao Linger, I would also betray him. Damn, you fickle man. So you're a Chrysanthemum fan?" Some of the students below the stage made a ruckus, and the actors on the stage were all dumbfounded. They looked at each other, dumbfounded, especially the actors who were pretending to be dead on the ground. They couldn't help but want to get up and see what was going on. Those who had their heads facing away from the stage were fine. By opening one eye and closing the other, they could secretly see what had happened on the stage. Even the actors who had died on their backs could barely see a little if they squinted their eyes. However, some of the actors whose heads were facing the stage or lying on their stomachs were suffocating. One by one, they heard the clamor below the stage, and also heard the frightening movement just now, but they didn't know what had happened. They just had to hit their heads and couldn't move. They were so anxious that they were scratching their ears and cheeks. It was as if there were 25 little mice scratching their hearts. On the stage, a corpse near Li Xiaoyao couldn't help but pull Li Xiaoyao's trousers and whisper, "Hey, what's going on?" Zhong Xiugua, who was playing Li Xiaoyao, was already dumbfounded. His eyes almost fell out of their sockets. He stammered, I, how would I know? A few of the corpses, who were closer to Li Xiaoyao, also pretended to be dead on the stage and whispered to each other, "Could this be a last-minute addition? I don't think so." Then what's going on? How would I know? What should we do? How are we going to continue acting? You're asking me? Who am I supposed to ask? We're all dead now, big sister. Just lie down obediently. Watch the show, yes, watch the show. Feng Na, who was backstage, was also dumbfounded. She stared blankly at the stage. She had no idea why such a thing had suddenly happened. The trap makeup artist, who had been standing next to her, couldn't help but ask Feng Na in shock, "Nana, when did you add scenes in private? Why didn't you inform us?" Feng Na's face twitched. She forced a smile, but it looked worse than crying. "I didn't add any scenes." The trap gasped. He looked at the stage in disbelief and asked, "What happened just now?" Cheng Cheng, who was under the stage, was also stunned and said, "What the hell is going on? That's not how the show is arranged." Only Zhou Qin understood what had just happened. It was not the first time she had seen Li Yundong, Zi Yuan, and the others use magic. Watch net. 7 KOM. She looked at Li Yundong and Zi Yuan with a complicated expression. Her eyes flickered, revealing a thoughtful look. Zhong Xiugua stood on the stage at a loss. He could clearly hear the shouts and laughter of some students below the stage. He also knew that he should think of a way at this time. Otherwise, if there was an awkward silence, it would become a joke. Zhong Xiugua pointed at Li Yundong and shouted, "Where on earth are you taking her?" This sentence was purely an extra sentence he added on the spot. The implication was to remind Li Yundong and Zi Yuan, "Hey, you two bosses, we are still acting here. Don't mess around." But Li Yundong was at a critical moment of life and death, so how could he care about this? His eyes were fixed on the roof of the auditorium. The threaded hairpin of soul traversal was hidden in a place where the light could not reach, like a poisonous snake that would jump out at any time. Li Yundong lowered his voice and said to Zi Yuan, "What the hell is going on?" Zi Yuan also lowered her voice and whispered, "I don't know, but just now." She was about to say something else when suddenly the threaded hairpin of soul traversal stabbed toward Li Yundong like lightning. Its speed was so fast that it seemed to tear the air apart. Zi Yuan immediately pushed out with one hand, trying to push Li Yundong away, but how could Li Yundong be willing to let a delicate woman protect him? He reached out and pulled Zi Yuan behind him. Then, with a loud shout, he shook the liuha in his hand and drew a sword flower with his wrist. In an instant, the sword flower turned from 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 4, blocking the front of him tightly. The people below the stage saw a white light surging in front of Li Yundong, like a surging steel wall. In the white light, there was a flash of golden light, like a pervasive gossamer. As soon as the golden light and the white light came into contact, there was a dense clanging sound. Go to the internet. 7 KOM. At first, the crowd could still hear the gap, but soon they heard that the clanging sound was so dense that it seemed to be connected into a line, making it hard for them to breathe. The moment Li Yundong held Zi Yuan's hand, her whole body suddenly tightened. She had lived for so long, and this was the first time a man had touched her skin. Her cheeks flashed with shame. Just as she was about to lose her temper, she saw that Li Yundong had already fought with the threaded hairpin of soul traversal. It was the first time in her life that Zi Yuan had come into contact with a man. For a moment, her Taoist heart was lost, and her mood was agitated. She looked at Li Yundong's figure behind him and suddenly felt a little lost. In a trance, she seemed to see her master. In the past, he had used such a broad back to shelter her from the wind and rain. At this moment, Zi Yuan felt that the world around her seemed to have quietened down. There was only this familiar figure in her eyes, but this feeling only lasted for a moment. Soon, her master's figure drifted away and was replaced by Li Yundong's back. At this time, everyone in the auditorium was dumbfounded. They couldn't understand what was going on at all. They were just dazzled, as if they were watching a movie. After Li Yundong blocked a series of attacks from the threaded hairpin of soul traversal, the threaded hairpin of soul traversal suddenly retreated and instantly split into countless golden hairpins. These golden hairpins formed a fierce face, which glared at Li Yundong fiercely, and then quickly merged into one. In the blink of an eye, it fled toward an open window in the auditorium. Li Yundong shouted, "Where are you going?" He jumped and chased after it. Zi Yuan didn't stop her. She hesitated for a moment, then immediately chased after her. The two of them flashed and jumped out of the window with a few leaps. For a moment, the auditorium was silent. Everyone opened their mouths wide, as if they couldn't believe their eyes. Because what had happened before was so incredible and shocking, most of them still hadn't reacted. They still thought that it was an act and that some of the incredible things in it were stunts. They were in a daze for a while. Suddenly, a boy couldn't help shouting, "Damn it, Zhao Linger eloped with the sword sage." This shout was particularly abrupt in the silent auditorium, and it immediately caused the students in the auditorium to laugh wildly. Isn't this too funny? Zhao Linger actually eloped with the sword sage. Li Xiaoyao is too tragic, isn't he? His own woman actually eloped with an old man. Who wrote this play? It's so funny. It can win the Nobel Prize for parody. Talented, really talented. This play deeply satirizes the current social situation. As a rich, powerful big shot, the sword sage naturally has beautiful women willing to throw themselves into his arms. Even Zhao Linger is no exception. F*ck, brother, your analysis is so strong. I'll F*ck your lungs. On the stage, Zhong Xiogua was alone, tears streaming down his face. I just want to act. Is it easy for me to play Li Xiaoyao? Who did I offend? He looked around and saw Feng Na and the others backstage, dumbfounded. The actors who had been killed on the stage were all lying on the ground and laughing. The heavenly bastard who had been in charge of the curtain didn't even know that it was over. He was standing alone on the stage, not knowing whether to advance or retreat. He was at a loss. Fortunately, Zhong Xiogua had an idea. He suddenly let out a miserable scream and then shouted, "Linger, wait for me." As he said this, he ran backstage. The audience under the stage laughed so hard that some students who were bored shouted, "Hey, you're running in the wrong direction. The old and the young are a couple. Why do you want to join in the fun? Can a man also be a mistress? Damn it, the most tragic Li Xiaoyao in history is born." The people in the auditorium were laughing, but Li Yundong, who had just come out, didn't know anything. He had just learned to fly, so his speed was naturally not very fast. After chasing for a short distance, he lost sight of the threaded hairpin of soul traversal. Zi Yuan quickly came to his side and said in a deep voice, "Don't chase after him." As soon as she finished speaking, Ruan Hongling also came out and said with a shocked face, "Sister Zi Yuan, what happened just now? What kind of magical item is that golden hairpin?" Zi Yuan said with a stern expression, "That's the threaded hairpin of soul traversal of Mo Ashi, the eldest disciple of the Fox Zen school." Ruan Hongling couldn't help but say angrily, "Is the Fox Zen school tired of living? How dare they assassinate you?" Zi Yuan shook her head and looked at Li Yundong. "No, she didn't want to kill me, but Li Yundong." Li Yundong's face was as dark as water. "I also felt that the threaded hairpin of soul traversal was targeting me just now. But why did she want to kill me? After all, I have some relationship with the Fox Zen school. Why did she want to kill me?" Zi Yuan thought for a while and said, "I will investigate this matter, but compared to Mo Ashi and the threaded hairpin of soul traversal, I am more concerned about another thing." "What is it?" Li Yundong and Ruan Hongling asked in unison. Zi Yuan's expression was surprisingly calm. She said, "Why did the Liuhe suddenly recognize its master when the threaded hairpin of soul traversal appeared?" Li Yundong suddenly remembered that he had seen the Liuhe jump out of its scabbard by itself and make a sword sound. He was shocked and said, "You mean your second Shibua was nearby at that time?" Ruan Hongling was also shocked. "Second Shibua? She's here? /om/" Chapter 236. Go to watch net. Hearing Zi Yuan's words, Li Yundong picked up the Liuhe in his hand and glanced at it. He saw that the long sword was emitting a faint white light in the night. The body of the sword was clean and bright, giving off a sense of coldness. He couldn't bear to put it down. Go to watch net. Li Yundong pondered for a while and said, "Until now, I still don't know what your second Shibua's name is." Zi Yuan said, "My second Shibua's surname is Yan Fang, and her Taoist name is Zhenrenjiexia. This Liuhe used to be her personal sword. Just now, the Liuhe recognized its master, most likely because it sensed the aura of my second Shibua, Yan Fang. Ruan Hongling couldn't help but say anxiously, since second Shirbua is nearby, why is she avoiding us? Doesn't she know that our Linggong sect is being severely suppressed now? If she had come back, we wouldn't be like this now. Zi Yuan glanced at her faintly and said, Hongling, it's better to rely on yourself than on others. It's the same even if it's second Shirbua. As she said this, she looked at the liuha in Li Yunyang's hand with a complicated look in her eyes and sighed slightly. When I first saw this liuha fall into your hands by accident, I felt that it was a coincidence. Now the spiritual energy of the owner of this liuha has been broken by you. What an anomaly. He put the liuha back into its sheath with a clang and handed it over. I had no choice just now. This sword wanted to kill me. I had to subdue it, so I had no choice but to do so. Zi Yuan didn't take it. She just shook her head and said, Buddhism talks about karma and opportunity, and so does our Taoism. If it's yours, even if I take it away now, it will still fall into your hands in the end. If it's not yours, even if you risk your life to snatch it, even if you pay with your life, it will never fall into your hands. Li Yundong thought of Wu Hao and LV Fengping and couldn't help but agree in his heart. However, he still handed the sword to Ruan Hongling and said with a smile, if this sword belonged to you, then I wouldn't be polite. But since it belongs to Yan Hua's family, if I take it like this, it will be embezzling other people's property. This is not good. Ruan Hongling, help me return it to Yan Hua. Ruan Hongling solemnly took the liuha with both hands and asked in confusion, this liuha is one of the most powerful magic weapons in our Zhengyi school. Don't you want it? Li Yundong chuckled and said, since Zi Yuan said that this sword is destined to be mine, even if I return it, it will return to my hands. Zi Yuan smiled and said, now that such a magical item has no owner, as long as you inject your Zhenqi into it, it will recognize you as its master. When the time comes, you just need to shout. Li Yundong spread his hands and said, look, now that I've returned the sword, if the liuha disappears, it won't be my problem anymore. Ruan Hongling couldn't help but laugh and scold, slippery fellow. Zi Yuan also smiled and said, I didn't expect you to be so cunning. Li Yundong said with an aggrieved expression, no way. I was so generous to return the sword, but you still scolded me. All right, give me the sword. I won't return it. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand toward Ruan Hongling. Ruan Hongling smiled and said, no way. I'm going to ask Yan Hua to lock this sword in the safe and make you cry to death if you can't get it. It was rare that Li Yundong didn't bicker with her. He just chuckled and didn't say anything else. He looked at Zi Yuan and asked, just now, this liuha wanted to kill me. I don't know if it was ordered by your second Shirbua or if it did it on its own. After pondering for a while, Zi Yuan said, unless you show strong hostility to my second Shirbua, it won't attack you directly. Watch net. Li Yundong recalled how the fan of 7 treasures had automatically protected him when a new student had challenged him. He nodded and said, you're right. But I have no enmity with Mo Ashi or your second martial uncle. Why would they attack me? Zi Yuan shook her head. This matter is very strange. Why did my second Shirbua's liuha and Mo Ashi's threaded hairpin of soul traversing attack you at the same time? If this is a coincidence, then why would Mo Ashi want to kill you? Why does my second martial uncle want to kill you? If it's not a coincidence, then... Ruan Hongling had a firecracker temper. She immediately jumped up and said, isn't it easy to know the answer? Let's go to the Fox Zen school and we'll know the answer. Zi Yuan glared at her and said, the situation is unclear now. You have no evidence and no reason. Why are you going there? If the other party is hostile, wouldn't you be walking right into a trap and sending yourself to death? Li Yundong said in surprise, no way. I have such a good relationship with Su Chan. She won't make things difficult for me, right? Zi Yuan asked, then how do you explain that Mo Ashi wanted to kill you with the threaded hairpin of soul traversal? The threaded hairpin of soul traversal is the most dangerous. It can hide the figure of the celestial device by the moonlight and shadows, and it is almost invisible to the naked eye when it is used. If I wasn't here tonight, I'm afraid you would have died. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, don't scare me. Zi Yuan patiently explained, I'm not trying to scare you. Watch net. 7 KOM. There has always been internal strife in the Fox Zen school. Even the top master of the Fox Zen school, Ao Wushuang, was expelled. Although Su Chan is Ao Wushuang's disciple, it's hard to say whether the Fox Zen school will accept her or not. Therefore, it's almost impossible for the Fox Zen school to treat you differently for Su Chan's sake. Li Yundong suddenly thought of something and was shocked. The girl won't be implicated, will she? The people of the Fox Zen school won't do anything to her, will they? Zi Yuan comforted him and said, Ao Wushuang has left the Fox Zen school for 10 years. I think she has nothing to do with the Fox Zen school. I don't think the Fox Zen school will make trouble for Su Chan. Li Yundong was a little relieved, but when he thought of Su Chan, he couldn't wait to go through the heavenly tribulation immediately and find his beloved little girl. Zi Yuan seemed to have seen through his thoughts and said, don't worry. The most important thing now is to improve your Shentong and Dharma power as soon as possible. The heavenly tribulation is imminent. Don't think too much about it. I will deal with this matter. After that, Zi Yuan turned to look at Wan Hongling. Hongling, go back to the mountain and take my golden invitation to the Fox Zen school to visit them. See how they react. By the way, take the souls of those 2 people back. I will deal with them when I return to the mountain. Wan Hongling responded with a sigh. Her figure turned into a blue light and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Not long after, she flew back and handed the Liuha to Zi Yuan. Sister Zi Yuan, help me return it to Yan Hua. After that, she turned into a beam of green light and left. Li Yundong watched from the side and asked curiously, why can you all turn into a beam of green light and fly away? And at such a fast speed? Zi Yuan smiled and said, when you reach the Yuanying phase and cultivate your Yin spirit or Yang spirit, you will be able to do so. Li Yundong had been studying hard these days. Although he had been diligent, it was inevitable that there were some questions he didn't know. He took the opportunity to ask, what is a Yin spirit? What exactly is a Yang spirit? How should I cultivate? Although Zi Yuan was about the same age as Li Yundong, she had been cultivating since she was a child. She had more than 10 years of cultivation experience than Li Yundong, so she naturally knew much more. She explained with a smile, in the 11th year of Chunyu in the Southern Song dynasty, Xie Xiandao, Lin Wuxian, Yi Gushi, Peng Helen, and others, jointly wrote the quotations of immortal Haiqiong Bai. The first volume of this book recorded, rebirth, there is a body outside the body. When it is gathered, it takes shape. When it is scattered, it becomes qi. This is the Yang spirit. One thought is clear and the soul consciousness has not dispersed. It is like a dream or a shadow. It is similar to a ghost. This is the Yin spirit. Li Yundong suddenly understood. I understand. The Yin spirit is more like a soul that can go out of the body, while the Yang spirit is like another avatar of oneself. Zi Yuan nodded. You can understand it that way. Li Yundong asked again, then why can I turn into a blue light and fly after cultivating the Yin spirit or the Yang spirit? Zi Yuan explained, what you saw just now was not a blue light, but the effect of the Yin spirit covering the body and helping it fly. As for the specific mystery of the cultivation method, you will be able to understand it when you cultivate your own Yin spirit. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, then how should I cultivate? Zi Yuan laughed. You are really greedy. You have just embarked on the cultivation of Shentong and you want to form a nascent soul and refine your spirit. Wait until you pass the heavenly tribulation. Li Yundong also laughed. He suddenly thought of something and said with a wry smile, "Oh no, I was only concerned about saving my life just now. I actually fought on the stage and even fought with the threaded hairpin of soul traversal. This is going to be fun. I'm afraid that people will look at us as aliens in the future." Zi Yuan couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. She rubbed her temples and said with a wry smile, "This is indeed a problem, but I won't let it get worse. Don't worry. As for the others, let them say what they want." She suddenly smiled sarcastically and said, "In this world, everyone either listens blindly or doesn't believe anything and only believes in themselves. They won't believe in these incomprehensible things. Didn't you also look shocked and incredulous when you heard about the Taoist methods of cultivation?" Li Yundong smiled embarrassedly and said, "I used to be very stupid and naive." Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong and couldn't help but taunt, "I think you are very dirty and violent, aren't you?" Li Yundong suddenly widened his eyes and looked at Zi Yuan with shock and admiration. He cupped his hands and said, "It turns out that Jinren Zi Yuan also knows Brother Guanxi. Sorry for my disrespect. Brother Guanxi is so famous that even Jinren Zi Yuan, the eldest Shiji of the Linggong sect of the Zhengyi school, also knows his name. It seems that Brother Guanxi can smile in the underworld." It was rare for Zi Yuan's Taoist heart to be shaken several times tonight, so at this time, she made a slip of the tongue. She couldn't help but glare at Li Yundong angrily and say angrily, "It's hard for me not to know such a scandal." Li Yundong didn't expect that Zi Yuan, who seemed to be otherworldly, would know about this gossip. For a moment, he was curious and excited and asked, "Hey, what else do you know? Do you know Aoi? What about Ozawa? What about Sakura? What about Yoshizawa?" Although Zi Yuan didn't know who the people Li Yundong was talking about were, she could tell from his eyes and smile that he was definitely not a decent person. She couldn't help blushing and glaring at Li Yundong angrily. She didn't say much, lest she made more mistakes, and walked away quickly. Li Yundong chased after her and laughed. Hey, don't go. It's also good to exchange experiences. Even if you don't exchange experiences, it's also good to have fun." At this time, Li Yundong was still dressed as a sword sage, and Zi Yuan was still dressed as Zhao Linger. The two of them walked quickly on the campus, and the other walked quickly. Their appearance was really ridiculous and funny, attracting the attention of the students in the school. At this time, the welcome party had also come to an end. It was time for the students to pour out of the auditorium and disperse. For a moment, the students widened their eyes and shouted, "Damn, did the sword sage take liberties with Zhao Linger? What's wrong? Didn't Zhao Linger elope with the sword sage? Hey, did the young couple have a quarrel?" Zi Yuan was angry in her heart. She was the dignified Shiji of the Linggong sect of the Zhengyi school. How could she be molested like this? It was really hateful. Zi Yuan wished she could stamp her feet and turn into a blue light to leave here, but there were people everywhere. If she flew away, it would be a big joke. Bursts of laughter around her penetrated Zi Yuan's ears. Finally, she couldn't help but turn around abruptly. The expression on her face was that she wanted to strangle Li Yundong, the frivolous and rude bastard, to death. Li Yundong saw that her face was full of anger and her eyes were full of fire. He stopped for a moment and didn't dare to make fun of her anymore. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Don't be angry, it's just a joke." Just as Zi Yuan was about to speak, she suddenly heard a sneer and a mocking voice coming from not far away. "Ha, you actually came. What a rare guest." Li Yundong also heard this sentence. He turned his head in the direction of the voice and saw a group of people gathered at the entrance of the auditorium. Ding Nan sneered and looked down at Zhou Qin. Oh, isn't this Miss Zhou Qin of our Tiannan University? When Ding Nan and Zhou Qin's eyes met, the two girls' eyes suddenly burst into sparks and smoke filled the air. Group 1, 2, 3, and 4 are full. Please add Group 5, 126359645/OM/452789419541954. Chapter 237. Go to Watch Net. During the days when Zhou Qin had been away from Tiannan University, Ding Nan had quickly used her influence to gather a group of like-minded girls. At this time, when she walked out of the auditorium, she saw Zhou Qin sitting in a wheelchair. New hatred and old hatred suddenly erupted in her heart, and she couldn't help but step forward to ridicule her. Go to Watch Net. 7 KOM 113 Shui 4 Net. Seeing Ding Nan's provocation, Zhou Qin sneered and said, "Hey, isn't this Ding Nan?" She glanced at the group of girls standing behind Ding Nan and said with a smile, "What's wrong? I haven't seen you for some time. Have you joined a club?" Ding Nan saw Zhou Qin sitting in a wheelchair and knew that the power she had relied on in the past had been destroyed, but she was still arrogant. She couldn't help but sneer and say, "I haven't seen you for more than 2 months. You've changed a lot, haven't you? But you're still sharp-tongued." When Zhou Qin heard Ding Nan's sarcasm that she was now a cripple in a wheelchair, her face suddenly darkened and she stopped bickering with her. Seeing that Zhou Qin was silent, Ding Nan thought that she had backed down. She had known Zhou Qin for a long time and knew that Zhou Qin had a strong personality. She liked to fight head-on and would never compromise. At this time, as soon as she flinched, Ding Nan couldn't help but feel proud and emotional. She sneered and said, "Zhou Qin, as the saying goes, the wheel of fortune turns. Weren't you very proud of yourself before? Why are you suddenly silent today?" Ding Nan clapped her hands and said to herself, "Ah, I know. You must be afraid." Ding Nan snorted and said with a sneer, "What are you afraid of? Is it because you no longer have the power to order me or threaten me? Is it because you realize that you are no longer the proud princess you used to be?" As she said this, Ding Nan raised her head and laughed. All the resentment she had accumulated in the past seemed to pour out at this moment. Zhou Qin, you have such a day. When you used to order me around, did you ever think that you would end up like this?" Ding Nan roared with a fierce look on her face. Cheng, who was pushing the wheelchair behind her, couldn't stand it anymore. She shouted, "Ding Nan, don't go too far." Ding Nan laughed out loud. "Am I going too far?" She pointed at Zhou Qin and shouted angrily, "She forced me to jump down from the roof. Isn't she going too far? She has used her power to humiliate me over and over again. Isn't she going overboard?" Zhou Qin looked at Ding Nan and said with a sneer, "Ding Nan, some roads are chosen by you. You can't blame others." Ding Nan suddenly bent down and gripped the armrests of the wheelchair tightly. She stared at Zhou Qin and said, "Yes, I chose this path myself. But do I have a choice? Humph, in the past, you relied on your wealth and power to trample on me, but now? Ha, the heavens really have eyes." Ding Nan suddenly straightened up and shouted to the surrounding students, "Look, this is the once arrogant Miss Zhou Qin. She can no longer be as arrogant and domineering as she used to be. Let's take revenge on her enemies and take revenge on her enemies. Ha ha ha." Although Zhou Qin had been arrogant in the past, she had always kept a low profile in school and had never had any grudges with anyone. In particular, she was extremely beautiful. At this time, she was sitting in a wheelchair, which made people feel sorry for her. Who would come to make trouble for her? Ching sneered and said, "Ding Nan, have you had enough? Do you think everyone is like you? Ding Nan looked at her with hatred, gritted her teeth, and said, "Cheng Cheng, this is none of your business. Get out of my way." Cheng Cheng shouted angrily, "Zhou Qin is my friend. Her business is my business." Ding Nan laughed and said, "I'm dying of laughter. Zhou Qin has no power or influence now. Why are you here to help her? Do you think that if you help her like this, she will be grateful to you and you will get any benefits?" Cheng Cheng was so angry that her face turned pale. She was about to yell at her, but Zhou Qin suddenly raised her hand and motioned for her not to speak. Cheng Cheng snorted coldly and glared at Ding Nan fiercely. Go to the internet. Zhou Qin was a person who was used to great storms. When her father had been punished, she had been forced to confess in secret for nearly 2 months, but she had not wavered at all. How could she give in at this time? Zhou Qin looked at Ding Nan meaningfully. She sneered and said, "Ding Nan, you're right. I am indeed no longer who I used to be. It doesn't matter if a phoenix is inferior to a chicken or a tiger has fallen to the ground. But let me tell you, no matter what I become, a chicken will always be a chicken. It will never fly up the branch and become a phoenix." When Ding Nan heard Zhou Qin calling her a chicken in a roundabout way, she suddenly became furious and scolded with an ugly face, "What good do you think you are? You are just a cripple, a cripple. What are you so proud of?" Li Yundong had never understood the grudge between Ding Nan and Zhou Qin, so he had not intervened just now. But when he heard this, he finally couldn't help it and shouted angrily, "Ding Nan, then what are you?" Li Yundong's shout immediately attracted everyone's attention. As soon as Ding Nan saw Li Yundong, she was shocked and became discouraged. She stammered, "Li Yundong? What are you doing here?" Li Yundong said angrily, "What am I doing? What are you doing?" Ding Nan really didn't want to have a conflict with Li Yundong. She loved this boy, so in the end, she had become enemies with Zhou Qin. But now that she was riding a tiger, she had no choice but to bite the bullet and say, "This is between me and Zhou Qin. Don't interfere." Li Yundong sneered and said, "I don't want to interfere either. But what did you say just now? Zhou Qin is already like this. Do you still want to kill her? You don't even have a trace of Buddha's heart. Are you still human? Look at you now. What's the difference between you and a vicious shrew?" Ding Nan looked at Li Yundong in shock. She felt as if someone had pinched her heart hard. She cried out involuntarily, "You don't know. She's pretending. She's lying to you. I know her best. She's the best at pretending and hypocrisy. She." Li Yundong shouted angrily, "Enough. Do some good for yourself." After that, Li Yundong pointed with his finger and said, "Get out of here. I don't want to see you." Ding Nan's eyes were filled with tears. She hissed, How could you do this to me?" Li Yundong's eyes widened and he was furious. "Get out of here." This angry shout tore Ding Nan's heart apart. She covered her face with her hands, sobbed, and rushed out of the crowd. Her figure quickly disappeared into the night. Go to Kanban. 7 K.O.M. Cheng Cheng looked at her back and spat on the ground. What kind of person is she? Just because she's a snob, does she think everyone in the world is a snob? Li Yundong took her hand and pushed Zhou Qin's wheelchair over. He comforted her and said, "Don't think too much. It was my fault just now. I shouldn't have left you alone." Zhou Qin smiled and said, "It's nothing." She looked up at Li Yundong and said, "I'm a little tired. Can you take me back?" Li Yundong nodded with a smile. He said goodbye to Zi Yuan, then said goodbye to Cheng Cheng, and pushed Zhou Qin out of the school. Along the way, Li Yundong could hear the students pointing at him and Zhou Qin, who was sitting in a wheelchair. "Who is this? So beautiful?" Is she Li Yundong's girlfriend? I don't know. I think so. What a pity. Why is she in a wheelchair? Alas, yes. Li Yundong frowned when he heard this. He couldn't wait to cure Zhou Qin's foot immediately. He was about to speak to Zhou Qin and comfort her when he suddenly saw her sigh softly. Zhou Qin whispered, Li Yundong. Li Yundong bent down slightly and said, Zhou Qin hesitated for a moment and asked, was I really a little too much in the past? Li Yundong was silent for a moment. He sighed and said, everyone has their own good fortune. Others only see that you were born into a better family than them, so they are jealous, but they don't see the pain and difficulties behind it. This can be considered a siege, right? Speaking of this, Li Yundong's tone suddenly changed and his voice became cold. But I absolutely can't stand it when Ding Nan humiliates others in public like this. Killing people is just a matter of nodding your head to the ground. You are already like this, but she still humiliates you like this. What is this? If it weren't for the fact that she is a girl, I would have slapped her in the face long ago. Forget it. I was wrong in the past. As she said this, Zhou Qin sighed. She looked up at Li Yundong with a gentle smile on her face, as if with this boy standing in front of her, she felt quiet and peaceful, happy and satisfied. Thank you for standing up for me today. Li Yundong looked at the sincere smile on Zhou Qin's face. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt very uncomfortable. He sighed and said, don't say such things. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I would have been a prisoner now. You have done me a great favor. Zhou Qin's face suddenly changed, and she said in a trembling voice, do you think you want to repay my kindness? That's why you are treating me like this? Li Yundong was stunned. He hadn't expected that Zhou Qin's expression would change so suddenly. In the blink of an eye, the gentle breeze had turned into a storm. Of course not. You are my friend. Li Yundong looked at Zhou Qin and said. Zhou Qin's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong's eyes. After a long time, she softened her expression and said softly, I'm sorry. I was too sensitive. Let's go back. Li Yundong smiled and nodded. One of them was standing and pushing the wheelchair, while the other was sitting in the wheelchair. For a moment, their shadows were stretched out under the streetlights of the campus. Ding Nan, who had been scolded by Li Yundong and had run away, cried all the way. She wandered blindly on the road like a headless fly. She was like a walking corpse that had lost her soul. She didn't know how far she had walked. When she came to her senses, she found herself at the end of a strange street. It was already late at night, and there were few pedestrians on the road. She was the only one standing on the side of the road, alone. Ding Nan wiped away her tears. She was at a loss about what to do. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept past her, and then her whole body flew up. When she landed again, she was already in a dark corner of the alley dozens of meters away. An old man with white hair and a ruddy face was holding Ding Nan's neck with one hand. He couldn't help looking her up and down, and said in surprise, not bad, you are indeed a good tripod furnace. Good disciple, you have picked so many tripod furnaces these days. This one is good, right? As he spoke, a woman suddenly appeared beside him. She had a coquettish face and a frivolous look in her eyes. She looked Ding Nan up and down, then suddenly laughed and said, not bad, you are indeed a good tripod furnace. What's more, you are a virgin tripod furnace. Good, good, good. She said, good, 3 times in a row, but Ding Nan was frightened by them. She struggled and shouted, what are you doing? The woman smiled and said, stop struggling. No one will come to save you. After I occupy your body, you will be completely obedient. Ah, of course, in a moment, your soul will belong to me, and your good virgin body. It's rare to see such a beautiful virgin. With that, the woman rushed toward Ding Nan and jumped into her body in the blink of an eye. Ding Nan looked frightened and struggled frantically. The woman's laughter came to her mind. By the way, you must remember my name. My name is LV Fengping, /OM/45278941954. Chapter 238. Go to watch net. Since Li Yundong had destroyed LV Fengping's body and Yin's spirit had left her body, she had been crying and cursing Li Yundong all the way. After a long time, she returned to Zheng Yuan, the leader of the Yin-Yang sect in Mount Wuhua. Go to watch net. When Zheng Yuan heard that his adopted son, Wu Hao, had been killed by a young boy, and that his beloved disciple, LV Fengping, had been destroyed, he felt that they had formed an irreconcilable feud. Zheng Yuan was furious and wanted to go down the mountain to take revenge, but it was not easy to find a person named Li Yundong in this world. There were so many people with the same name and surname. When he found this guy named Li Yundong and found Tiannan City, he was surprised to find that there were people fighting in Tiannan City. When he followed his magic power to find her, he was surprised to find Ding Nan, a good human tripod furnace. Most importantly, this girl was not only a virgin Yuan human tripod furnace, but also had lost her soul. Her spiritual power was very weak, which was very suitable for LV Fengping to be reborn. These days, LV Fengping had been looking for Li Yundong, her big enemy, while looking for a good furnace. She had been a coquettish beauty when she was alive, so she naturally refused to make do with it casually. No matter how she looked, she was not satisfied. It was not that her appearance was not good enough, but that her physical talent was not good enough. Tonight, she suddenly found Ding Nan, a good furnace. For a moment, she was so excited that she even forgot to kill Ding Nan. She immediately got into Ding Nan's body, wanting to devour her soul and occupy this body. The moment LV Fengping got into her body, Ding Nan suddenly shuddered, and all the incredible things she had seen in Li Yundong's body flashed through her mind. Why was this boy able to catch me from the 5th floor? Why was this boy able to dodge bullets? At this moment, Ding Nan seemed to understand everything in an instant. It turns out that Li Yundong is not an ordinary person, just like these two people. Ding Nan's divine sense and soul were in a daze in her spirit space. However, LV Fengping was like a tree vine tightly wrapped around her body, getting tighter and tighter. Countless vines pierced into her body from every orifice. LV Fengping smiled proudly and excitedly. By the way, don't struggle. Be good and listen to me. It won't hurt. Just think of it as a nap. Ding Nan was shocked. She looked at LV Fengping, who was getting tighter and tighter in the spirit space, and suddenly said angrily, "Who are you? What do you want?" LV Fengping giggled and said, "You're so forgetful. Didn't I just tell you my name?" How could he have forgotten so quickly? But it doesn't matter, you won't know anything in a while. Your beautiful body will belong to me, and your soul will also belong to me. Ding Nan was shocked. She wants to kill me? Thinking of this, Ding Nan couldn't help but feel resentment and hatred. In the past, Zhou Qin bullied me, and even Li Yundong helped her. Now, even you want to bully me? How could it be so easy? She couldn't help but focus all her resentment on LV Fengping. With a roar, she wrestled with LV Fengping in her spirit space. Watch net. It wasn't easy to occupy a living person's body, especially when the person was still alive and kicking. It was even more difficult. Either the Yin spirit of the person being possessed was so powerful that it was much stronger than that of the person being possessed, and when it invaded the other person's spirit space, it could instantly wipe out the other person's divine sense and soul. Otherwise, even if it invaded the other person's body, it was possible to be wiped out by the other person. Or, the living person could be controlled with drugs, so that their divine sense and soul would be weakened to the brink of death, and then their body could be invaded. At first, LV Fengping saw that Ding Nan had been in a trance along the way, so she thought that this woman's soul and will must be weak and easy to bully, so she got into Ding Nan's body without any preparation. But she had underestimated Ding Nan. At this time, ordinary girls might have been crying and begging for mercy, but Ding Nan was not an ordinary girl. In order to achieve her goal, she even dared to take the initiative to attack Zhou Qin. Seeing that Ding Nan suddenly resisted violently, LV Fengping couldn't help being shocked. She threatened in a fierce voice, "Do you think you can be stronger than me? Why are you resisting? Resistance will only increase your pain. It's futile. Don't resist." Ding Nan gritted her teeth and said, "Even if I'm no match for you, don't think you'll have an easy time. I'd rather die with you." LV Fengping was furious. With a loud roar, she began to wrestle with Ding Nan in her spirit space. But after all, this spirit space was Ding Nan's home field. Although her divine sense was strong and she was a cultivator, the power of her Yin spirit had been weakened a lot after so many days without her body to rely on. Moreover, she was a guest army after all. Fighting with Ding Nan in Ding Nan's body, she had suffered a great loss. In addition, Ding Nan's tenacious resistance made it impossible for her to win quickly. She was dragged into a battle of attrition, and the power of her Yin spirit was constantly weakening. Watch net. Taking advantage of her home field advantage, Ding Nan fought more and more bravely. Gradually, she even took the power of LV Fengping's Yin spirit as her own. The chaotic and dark spirit space around them began to brighten, and there seemed to be dazzling sunlight shining above their heads. LV Fengping's Yin spirit became weaker and weaker. In the end, there was only a thin layer of shadow left. She looked at Ding Nan, who was getting stronger and stronger, in fear and despair, and said in a hoarse voice, "How is this possible? How can your divine sense be so strong? It's impossible." Ding Nan lost her temper. It was the first time in her life that she had won so happily. Ding Nan laughed, stretched out her hand, and grabbed LV Fengping's neck with one hand. She said ferociously, "If you want to kill me, then I'll kill you. Anyone who goes against me will pay the price." As she spoke, she squeezed hard. It was a pity that LV Fengping went for wool and came home shorn. She wanted to devour Ding Nan's soul and occupy her body, but she didn't expect that in the end, her Yin spirit would be devoured by Ding Nan. With a roar, her Yin spirit exploded in an instant, turning into countless cyan gossamer threads. After floating around in the spirit space for a while, they slowly and automatically began to surge toward Ding Nan's body. As these cyan threads were merged with Ding Nan's soul, she peeped into LV Fengping's memory bit by bit. She suddenly saw a world she had never seen before open to her. The door was dark, mysterious and majestic, which made her excited and fanatical. Although Zheng Yuan was the leader of the Yin-Yang sect, it was extremely difficult to predict what was going on in Ding Nan's body. Even the gods didn't know what was going on in Ding Nan's body. Moreover, he had extremely strong confidence in his beloved disciple. "Pinger can't defeat the soul of this lost woman? Are you kidding me? It's impossible." Zheng Yuan had been observing Ding Nan's body with narrowed eyes. He saw that Ding Nan's face had changed from shock and fear at first to anger and struggle, and then slowly to pride and ecstasy. He thought that LV Fengping had taken control of the body, so he stroked his white beard proudly and said with a smile, "How do you feel, Pinger?" Ding Nan slowly opened her eyes and took a deep look at the powerful cultivator in front of her. She resisted the urge to kill the old man. She stared at Zheng Yuanliang for a long time, and the look in her eyes changed. Seeing her like this, Zheng Yuan didn't doubt her. He just asked in a slightly strange tone, "What's wrong? Could it be that you're not used to being a new cauldron?" Ding Nan suddenly smiled strangely. She giggled and said meaningfully, "No, I'm very good. I've never felt so good. Master." Zheng Yuan chuckled and reached out to put his hand on Ding Nan's wrist. "You've just occupied a new cauldron, so it's more important for you to cultivate again. There's no hurry to take revenge. Anyway, the monk can run away, but the temple can't. How about we go back first?" As soon as Ding Nan's wrist was touched by him, she suddenly got goosebumps, but she remained calm. She just glanced at Zheng Yuan coldly and quickly and said with a smile, "I'll listen to you, master." Zheng Yuan tilted his head and looked at Ding Nan, stroking his beard. He grinned and said, "Hey, you've changed your body. I always feel strange." Ding Nan smiled and said, "You'll slowly get used to it in the future, master." Zheng Yuan laughed and waved his hand. "Then let's go back to the mountain first." After that, he turned into a green light with Ding Nan and disappeared in an instant. After sending Zhou Qin back to the hospital, Li Yundong returned home. As soon as he entered the house, he saw that it was dark, and the empty living room was cold and silent, which made him a little uncomfortable. He had already adapted to the days when there were people in the house. As soon as he entered the door, there was warm light, hot food, and hot tea. Or it could be said that he had gradually adapted to the appearance of Zi Yuan in his life. When Li Yundong entered the door, he didn't see Zi Yuan. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, "Where has this fairy sister gone? Why haven't I seen her today?" Li Yundong searched around the house, but he didn't see Zi Yuan. He put down the fan of 7 treasures, walked to the balcony, and looked in the direction of Zi Yuan's room. He saw a faint light coming from the room connected to the balcony. Seeing that it was late at night, Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat and he flew over. Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling often acted as uninvited guests and jumped onto the balcony of his house without saying hello. However, this was the first time that Li Yundong had set foot in Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling's residence. As soon as he landed, Li Yundong saw that the French windows of the balcony were separated by a thick layer of bright yellow curtains, and a soft light shone through the curtains. Li Yundong gently stretched out his hand and pushed the French windows of the balcony, only to see that they were open. The French windows were not locked. Li Yundong curiously pushed open the screen window and took a look. He saw that there was only one wall lamp in the living room, and the color was very warm. Although the room was complete with appliances and furniture, it looked very modern. However, there was an incense burner on the coffee table in the living room. There were 3 sandalwood incense sticks in the incense burner. The sandalwood incense sticks emitted bursts of green smoke, looking antique in this modern decorated room. Li Yundong looked around the living room. He saw a ray of light shining in the bedroom, so he walked over curiously. He walked to the door and looked into the room, only to see a slim woman in a white dress and a transparent gauze. She was sitting at a desk with her back to him. Li Yundong knew that this woman was Zi Yuan just by looking at her back. Under the soft light, Zi Yuan's back looked hazy and gentle, ethereal and elegant. There were brushes, ink, paper, and inkstones in front of her. One of her slender hands was holding a brush, and her snow-white wrist was as smooth and translucent as jade under the light. For a moment, Li Yundong was stunned. It was as if he had seen the fairy flying out of the Dunhuang frescoes. A beautiful woman was standing in front of him, gently grinding the ink, slowly lifting the brush, and elegantly waving the brush. Li Yundong held his breath. He didn't even dare to disturb Zi Yuan, for fear that if he made a little louder, he would destroy this beautiful and serene scene. He walked over gently and looked over Zi Yuan's shoulder to see the words she had written in front of her. There was a stack of xian paper on the desk. Zi Yuan's wrist gently turned, and the tip of the brush quickly wrote a 7-rhythm poem on the xian paper. Once the Jindan appears, the fate of the world is set, and the thunder first sounds to see the truth. The spirit mirror is easy to break, and the mortal tribulation is difficult to break with a sword. Yunhai sits and looks at old Yunhai, and talks about the wind and dust in front of the stone. Chang'e has no regrets in stealing elixirs. Why should Hongyang envy Zhangsheng? After Zi Yuan picked up the brush and finished writing, she stared blankly at the beautiful handwriting. She was in a daze until the brush she was holding dripped a drop of ink on the rice paper and dyed a black ink spot. She woke up with a start. After thinking for a while, she wrote another name on the ink spot, Wang Yuanshan. After a while, she frowned slightly, hesitated for a while, and wrote another name next to Wang Yuanshan, Li Yundong. After Zi Yuan finished writing, she slowly put the pen on the pen holder and sighed softly. Her eyes were blurred and blank as she looked at the Qilu and the two names in front of the table. For a moment, she couldn't help but be fascinated. Chapter 239. Go to watch net. Li Yundong stood behind Zi Yuan and looked at the poem. Although he felt strange in his heart, he vaguely felt that the poem was talking about him. Go to watch net. 7 K.O.M. Especially the first sentence, once Jindan appears, the fate of the world will be determined, made him feel even more strange. It was as if at this time, Li Yundong seemed to have some understanding of what Ruan Hongling had said to Zi Yuan in the past. After an unknown period of time, Li Yundong coughed softly. Zi Yuan's body suddenly tightened, and she instantly crumpled the paper in front of her. She suddenly turned around and shouted in a low voice, "Who is it?" She turned around, holding the paper ball in one hand, and the other hand was surrounded by a faint cyan light. It seemed that in the next second, an extremely powerful magic would be released and give people a thunderous blow. When Zi Yuan saw Li Yundong, she was stunned. "Why are you here? Why are you here?" Li Yundong coughed dryly and didn't answer. "Why? You've come to my house so many times. Can't I come to your place once?" Zi Yuan relaxed her nerves, and the faint cyan light in her hand slowly disappeared. However, her other hand subconsciously clenched the paper ball in her hand. Her ears were slightly red, and she looked a little embarrassed, but she pretended that nothing had happened and asked, "How long have you been here?" Li Yundong wanted to ask her what the poem meant, but seeing her like this, he was too embarrassed to ask again. He said, "I just came here for a while." Zi Yuan suddenly breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She quietly hid the paper ball in her hand behind her, pretending to be nonchalant, and asked lightly, "What can I do for you?" Li Yundong had nothing to do at first. He had just come over out of curiosity, but he hadn't expected to see the scene just now. He thought for a moment and casually made up a reason. "Nothing, I just thought of how I subdued the Liuhe tonight and had some questions in my heart." Go to watch net. When it came to cultivation, Zi Yuan gradually regained her composure. She stood up and said, "What questions?" Li Yundong said, "When I subdued the Liuhe, I used my blood because I remember Su Chan once told me that my boy Yuanyang blood was specialized in breaking all the yin qi in the world." Zi Yuan nodded and said, "Yes." Li Yundong asked again, "That virgin primordial yin blood should be able to destroy all the yang qi in the world, right?" Zi Yuan suddenly smiled faintly. She shook her head and said, "That's not necessarily true. Yin and yang reinforce and counteract each other. The so-called primordial yang blood is specialized in breaking all the yin qi in the world, but it also depends on the specific situation. Your primordial yang blood itself contains a powerful gold core yuan qi, plus your inner core is vigorous and condensed, so your primordial yang blood can break almost all the yin qi in the world. However, if the opponent's yin qi is much stronger than yours, then you won't be able to break through it. This principle is like the relationship between water and fire. Water can put out a fire, but how can a basin of water extinguish a house fire? After Zi Yuan finished explaining, she looked at Li Yundong in confusion and asked, "Why did you suddenly ask this question?" Li Yundong said, "Although it was a little thrilling when I subdued the Liuhe tonight, the process was much smoother than I had imagined. Almost as soon as my boy Yuanyang blood touched the Liuhe, it was immediately subdued and used by me. So I was thinking that if one day I use the fan of 7 treasures to fight with someone, and the other party uses a powerful virgin primordial Yin blood to break the yang qi I left in the fan, wouldn't my fan of 7 treasures be taken away?" After hearing this, Zi Yuan looked appreciative. She said, "The fact that you can think of this shows that you are already a qualified cultivator." "That's right. Yin and Yang and the 5 elements of heaven and earth reinforce and counteract each other. If you can know the cultivation attribute of the other party and use it to target it, you will get twice the result with half the effort. This is the reason why you subdued the Liuhe. Go to the internet. 7KOM. It is also because of this that many cultivators set their personal magical artifacts with several different attributes, making it impossible for you to use one method to instantly subdue the magical artifact." As she spoke, Zi Yuan turned her wrist and took out a purple ribbon that was 3 fingers wide from her sleeve. She handed one end of the ribbon to Li Yundong and said with a smile, "Try to subdue this magical item of mine." Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan in surprise. "Aren't you afraid that I'll take your magical item away?" Zi Yuan smiled slightly. "If you really have such magical power, then I should worship you as my master." Li Yundong laughed, and there was a faint eagerness in his eyes. He grabbed a corner of the ribbon with his fingers and felt that it was smooth and soft, almost slippery. Li Yundong tried to inject his Yuanyang Zhenqi into the ribbon, but as soon as he did so, he felt a strong Yin Qi bounce back. This Yin Qi was long and soft, like a vast sea. No matter how Li Yundong mobilized his Yuanyang Zhenqi to attack, it could easily resolve his fierce attack. Li Yundong's heart trembled. He stopped for a moment, then suddenly mobilized all the Yuanyang Zhenqi in his body and attacked with all his strength. This attack was ferocious, as if a towering mountain had fallen into the sea, setting off monstrous waves. Li Yundong was overjoyed when he saw that the Yin Qi was finally showing signs of defeat. He thought that he was about to win against Zi Yuan's personal magical item. Just as he was about to take advantage of the victory to pursue it, he suddenly felt a stream of Yang Qi and an unknown force suddenly jump out of the magical item. This Yang Qi was not strong, but it always restrained Li Yundong's power, making him unable to concentrate on attacking the Yin Qi. Another strange force appeared to be strong and hard, like a machete, but also like a Qingfeng sword. It attacked Li Yundong's Yuanyang Zhenqi from the side again and again. Li Yundong's Yuanyang Zhenqi and the Yuanyang Zhenqi in this ribbon restrained each other. At this time, when he had the upper hand, he was naturally unstoppable. However, when faced with this strange force and a trace of Yuanyang Zhenqi, he could not gain an advantage at all. After a few rounds, Li Yundong went from winning to being in a stalemate, and then he was beaten by the 3 forces. Just as she was about to be devoured by the backlash, Zi Yuan suddenly pulled back the ribbon in his hand and said with a smile, "How is it?" Li Yundong broke out in a cold sweat and said with lingering fear, "What's going on? I can understand that there is Yang Qi in it. After all, for a cultivator like you, the supreme Yin Qi produces the supreme Yang Qi. Yin and Yang are endless, which is very normal. But where did the other force come from? What kind of power is this?" Zi Yuan smiled and waved at Li Yundong. "Come over and take a look." As she said this, she touched the ribbon with her finger. Li Yundong leaned over to take a look and saw that the ribbon was glowing with a golden light. In this golden light, a row of mysterious and strange runes appeared faintly on the ribbon. Li Yundong asked in confusion, "What is this?" Zi Yuan looked at the ribbon lovingly and sighed. She gently brushed her fingers over the runes and said softly, "This is the rune that my master branded with gold sand for me, which is the strange force that you felt just now. This force is the power of the metal attribute of the 5 elements. It is used to prevent someone from breaking my magical item by targeting the opposite attribute." Li Yunyang suddenly understood and said, "I see. Your magical item has the yin attribute, the yang attribute, and the metal attribute. The opponent can restrain your supreme yin qi, but he can't restrain your supreme yang qi. Even if he can restrain both, he will be defeated by your metal attribute, which is a hidden secret weapon." Zi Yuan smiled and nodded. "That's right. Fighting is like using troops. There is a saying in Sun Tzu's Art of War, win with surprise. The 3 forces in my magical item are based on this principle. I'll use my main yin qi to hold back your main force, and then I'll use my yang qi to harass you in all directions, making you distracted and unable to be distracted. Then, I'll send out a surprise attack, and you won't be able to defend against it. Naturally, you'll be beaten back again and again." Li Yundong's eyes lit up when he heard this. He clapped his hands and exclaimed, "Wonderful! I didn't expect that there would be so much knowledge in fighting." Zi Yuan said with a smile, "Do you think that fighting is about who is stronger, whose spiritual power is stronger, and whose magical powers are more extensive will win? No. If that's the case, you would have been dead when you met Wu Hao and LV Fengping of the Yin Yang sect when you had just reached the Zhuji phase. Their spiritual power and magical powers are much stronger than yours. But you still won. Why do you think so?" Li Yundong was lost in thought. He recalled the scene at that time and didn't speak for a while. Zi Yuan said, "It's because Wu Hao and LV Fengping underestimated the enemy, but at that time, your will was much stronger than theirs, and your ability to adapt to the situation was also much stronger than theirs. Cultivators fight with each other like rabbits and falcons. Often, the outcome can be decided in a few moves. It's impossible to fight for hundreds of rounds like on TV. Therefore, fighting is like using a weapon. If you don't have an absolute chance of winning, then you must find a way to use a weak weapon to be arrogant, a strong weapon to resist, and a surprise attack to win." Hearing this, Li Yundong sighed and said, "I understand. Today, I know why Su Chan said that you are the #1 expert of the younger generation in the cultivation world. Fortunately, when I had just reached the Zhuji phase, the enemy I met was not you. Otherwise, I would have died without a burial place." Zi Yuan shook her head and said, "Don't belittle yourself. Your talent is rare in the world, and your luck is even more rare. In less than half a year, you have cultivated to the realm of Shentong. This kind of progress is simply shocking. If you continue to cultivate like this for a few more years, I'm afraid that I won't be your opponent." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Well, it's not good for the two of us to flatter each other. By the way, I want to ask if I can add another attribute to my fan of 7 treasures. I'm always afraid that this magical item will be taken away." Zi Yuan nodded and said with a smile, "Yes." Li Yundong's eyes lit up. "Yes? What can I do?" She said, "Next time, you should say hello before you come back. Don't appear behind me silently. Watch net." Li Yundong smiled and said, "How could I be silent? You were so engrossed that you didn't even notice me when I walked up to you." Zi Yuan couldn't help blushing slightly. She said angrily, "Anyway, just knock on the door in the future." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Okay, I'll definitely knock next time." As he spoke, he walked out of Zi Yuan's bedroom and went to the balcony. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly thought of something and asked, "By the way, why does your magical item have metal properties, but Yuan Hongling's magical item doesn't? If her magic tool also had this attribute, I'm afraid I would have died long ago. Zi Yuan sighed slightly. Hongling is my master's disciple in name, but she has hardly been taught by him for more than a few days. Master only passed on a magical item to her, and then she ascended to become an immortal. There was no time to add other attributes to her magical item. Li Yundong suddenly asked, "Is your master's name Wang Yuanshan?" Zi Yuan's eyes were deep in thought. She replied casually, "Yes." But she soon came to her senses and glared at Li Yundong with shame and anger. "Did you see everything just now?" Seeing that the situation was not good, Li Yundong laughed dryly and flew back to his balcony, shouting, "I didn't do it on purpose. I just saw your master's name." Zi Yuan was embarrassed and angry on the balcony. Her cheeks were as red as the rosy clouds in the evening, but Li Yundong's words at least made her feel a little relieved. Fortunately, he had only seen her master's name. But before long, she suddenly realized something. What did he mean by, "only saw your master's name"? This meant that he had seen something else. Otherwise, why did he add the word, "yes"? So he saw the psalm that master left for me? He saw me write his name? I wrote his name with no other meaning. It's just. Zi Yuan was flustered, and her mind was in a mess. For a moment, she stood on the balcony in a daze, her heart in a mess, and she couldn't help but fall into a daze. Go to see net. 7 KOM. When Li Yundong returned to his home, he thought about the psalm he had seen for a while and couldn't help but wonder, what does this poem mean? He thought for a while, but he couldn't figure it out, so he stopped thinking about it and took out the fan of 7 treasures from his cloth bag. Then, he took out the 5 Yang blood pearl and LV Fengping's whip, which he had hidden at home from Wu Hao. Li Yundong sat cross-legged in the living room and looked at the 3 magical items in front of him. He muttered to himself, "Well, the main magical item I have now is the fan of 7 treasures. Its attribute is Yang, so how about I add some Yin Qi to it? But the question is, how do I add it?" Li Yundong closed his eyes and began to circulate his qi. He could feel the powerful primordial Yang Qi surging in his body, but how could this pure primordial Yang Qi produce the supreme Yin Qi? If a master of external boxing couldn't practice softness from hardness, then he would only be a boxer for the rest of his life. He wouldn't be able to become a master, and if he met a top master, he would most likely be defeated. Similarly, if a master of internal boxing couldn't practice hardness from softness, then he would only be a master for the rest of his life. He wouldn't be able to fight, and he wouldn't be able to fight. The same was true of cultivation. Although the explosive power of pure Yang Qi was strong and powerful, it couldn't last long. Although the power of pure Yin Qi was long and mighty, it wasn't explosive enough and couldn't defeat the enemy. It had to be a combination of Yin and Yang and complement each other. Li Yundong looked at the fan of 7 treasures placed from left to right in front of him and thought to himself, this is a magical item of pure Yang attribute. His eyes fell on the dark red whip in the middle. Li Yundong reached out and picked it up. He thought to himself, I've got such a magical item, but I haven't taken a good look at it yet. I don't know what kind of magical item it is. He slightly qi and tested it, but he felt an extremely soft Yin power coming from it. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. Is this a magical item of Yin attribute? He tried to probe it again, but suddenly felt a tough and strange power coming from it. This power was relatively similar to the Yin Qi in it, but it was also different. The two forces supported and nourished each other, which surprised Li Yundong very much. Li Yundong couldn't figure out the source of this power, so he put down the whip for a moment and didn't probe it again, lest the magical item backfire because he didn't know the enemy's situation. Li Yundong's eyes moved to the 5 Yang blood beads, and he couldn't help frowning for a moment. He suddenly thought of the countless ghosts released by the 5 yang blood beads when he was fighting with Wu Hao. Especially when the 5 yang blood beads hit Wu Hao, the flames had burned Wu Hao to ashes, and the ghosts had devoured his soul completely. Thinking of this, Li Yundong couldn't help but shiver. He picked up the 2 5 yang blood beads and couldn't help looking them up and down. He was secretly shocked. The 5 yang blood beads were black, as if they were the color of blood. The beads were about the size of a thumb, and their surface was smooth. Li Yundong could faintly see a dark red airflow surging through the surface. Li Yundong slightly qi went in and immediately felt an extremely cold aura suddenly counterattack. It was fierce and sharp, and the aura was bone-chilling. Li Yundong frowned slightly, and the Yuanyang qi in his body suddenly burst out, like a hot torrent to meet the cold qi. As soon as the 2 auras collided, the 5 yang blood beads suddenly jumped out of his palm and trembled violently in the air, as if they would explode in the next second. Li Yundong was shocked. "Oh no, if it explodes here, it doesn't matter if I'm injured or not, the house will be destroyed." Li Yundong stood up and stretched out his hand to grab the 5 yang blood bead. As soon as he grabbed it, the 5 yang blood bead suddenly flashed with a dark red light, illuminating the room. Then, with a buzzing sound, the 5 yang blood bead suddenly exploded. At this moment, Li Yundong saw a dark red flame constantly rolling and growing in front of him. Countless black ghosts howled from the flame and pounced on him with ferocious faces. Without thinking, Li Yundong immediately made Vajra fists with both hands. His left index finger was straight, and he used the little finger of his right hand to hold the first joint of his left index finger. The tip of his left index finger was supported by the first joint of his right thumb, and he made a mantra Mahamudra. In the blink of an eye, Li Yundong's qi sank into his dantian, and his voice was like spring thunder. He shouted, "Bang!" This was Bodhi's first wisdom seal, the Vajra fist seal of the great Sun Dharma realm, which could destroy all darkness. Li Yundong's Mahavirokana palm print was thrown out. In the blink of an eye, a golden palm print flew straight out from the balcony into the sky, leaving a long golden light behind. It didn't dissipate until it was very far away. Countless ghosts and fierce souls were slapped by the Mahavirokana handprint. Those who were hit directly disappeared without a sound, and some of them, even if they were brushed by it, suddenly had smoke rising from their bodies. They wailed and fled in all directions, not daring to take another step toward Li Yunyang. However, it was easy to extinguish ghosts, but difficult to put out a fire. Li Yundong saw a ball of fire burning out of thin air in front of him. This ball of fire twisted violently, and it kept compressing to the middle. Then, it suddenly exploded, and sparks flew in all directions in the room. Li Yunyang subconsciously lifted the fan of 7 treasures with the tip of his foot. He grabbed the bone of the fan with one hand and waved his other hand fiercely. With a swoosh, the fan of 7 treasures suddenly opened, and the fan leaves clanged like flywheels. The fan of 7 treasures spun in the living room, and immediately, like a huge whirlpool, it forcibly sucked all the flames around it into its body. For a moment, the fan of 7 treasures also burned fiercely. Just as Li Yundong was about to extinguish the dark red flame, he suddenly saw the other 5 yang blood pearl tremble violently with a buzzing sound. Then, it suddenly jumped into the air, trembled for a while, and exploded with a bang. Chapter 241. Go to watch net. The moment Li Yundong saw the second 5 yang blood pearl fly up, all the hair on his body stood on end. All the 36,000 pores on his body suddenly opened, and the Jinqi in his body suddenly surged out. This was all the potential that a person could burst out at the moment of life and death. Li Yundong's Jinqi poured out like a flood, like a huge wave rushing toward the 5-yang blood pearl that was about to explode. Go to watch net. The moment the Jinqi wrapped around the 5-yang blood bead, the 5-yang blood bead suddenly exploded with a bang. The explosive force shook Li Yundong's body, and the Jinqi he had released was almost instantly scattered. The rolling dark red flame continued to spread, and in the blink of an eye, it rushed toward Li Yundong. At this time, all the Jinqi in Li Yunyang's body was pouring out. It could be said that he had no power to defend himself at all. He couldn't even pick up the fan of 7 treasures. He could only watch the flames and the ghosts rushing at him fiercely. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind: it's over. But with a thought, the fan of 7 treasures in his hand suddenly jumped up and flew out of his hand. As it jumped into the air, all the leaves of the fan opened up. Every leaf made a clanging sound and quickly jumped out of the fan, forming a row in the air. It was like a steel wall that had appeared out of nowhere. The roaring flame suddenly hit the iron wall of the fan of 7 treasures, and its momentum was immediately blocked. Li Yundong, who was behind the fan, only felt a scorching heat blowing in his face, and the ends of his hair were curled up by the roasting heat. Li Yundong saw that the flame was blocked by the fan of 7 treasures and quickly spread around. Seeing that the room was about to become a sea of fire, he subconsciously thought, "Oh no, this house is going to be destroyed." As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, the iron wall in front of him suddenly made a clanging sound and quickly pulled open into a circular iron wall, firmly wrapping the flame in it. Although the number of the fan leaves was limited and there was inevitably a gap in the middle, the high-speed rotation of the fan made up for this. Moreover, as the fan leaf rotated at high speed, the golden Sanskrit on the fan leaf also floated out, forming a thick and dense layer of golden pagoda inside and outside. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. At first glance, Li Yundong could only feel the golden light and awe-inspiring divine power. He was shocked and couldn't help thinking, could it be that the fan of 7 treasures knows what I'm thinking? Ah, right, the so-called fan of 7 treasures is naturally psychic. Not only can it protect its master, but it can also know its master's thoughts. Thinking of this, Li Yundong began to consciously control the treasured fan. If it weren't for the fact that the fan of 7 treasures automatically protected its owner, and its Vajra Yang Qi just happened to restrain the ghostly Yin Qi of the 5-yang blood bead, not only would this powerful magical weapon have been destroyed, but you would also have been finished. Li Yundong looked aggrieved. Didn't you ask me to refine it? Zi Yuan said angrily, I asked you to refine it later, not now. Li Yundong smiled awkwardly and said, I misunderstood. Seeing that Zi Yuan was angry, he quickly changed the topic and asked, what did the Akalanatha say just now? What language was he speaking? Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong, as if she was helpless about this shameless guy. She sighed slightly and said, he was speaking Sanskrit. Li Yundong asked, what did he say? Why did the ghostly aura run to the psychic fan of 7 treasures after he finished speaking? Zi Yuan said, he said, those who see my body will have a Bodhi heart, those who hear my name will cut off evil and cultivate good, those who hear my Dharma will have great wisdom, and those who know my heart will become Buddha. Li Yundong thought of the Buddhist classics he had read and suddenly understood. I see, this is the vow of the Akalanatha. Zi Yuan nodded and said, it's also the incantation of the Akalanatha to subdue demons. By chance, you have refined the ghost chi of the 5-yang blood pearl into the fan of 7 treasures. It can be said that you are an anomaly among anomalies. Others would never have thought that your fan of 7 treasures, which is full of yang chi and majestic and solemn, actually has such evil and vicious spiritual power. If the other party comes to steal your magical item, they will definitely suffer a great loss. Li Yundong laughed and said, this is called good people will be rewarded, and good people will be blessed. Seeing his frivolous and arrogant smile, Zi Yuan couldn't help but say with a smile, I think you are a villain who has achieved success. Li Yundong grinned and winked at Zi Yuan. Are you jealous of me? Zi Yuan spat and said, you are the fastest cultivator in the world, and you are also the most thick-skinned one. Li Yundong cupped his hands shamelessly and said with a smile, thank you for the compliment. Zi Yuan shook her head with a smile and said, I won't talk to you anymore. I just heard that something was wrong here, so I flew over to have a look. Before you reach the yuanying phase, don't easily refine a magical item. Otherwise, the consequences will be unpredictable. This kind of thing can't happen again, but it can't happen a third time. You must remember this. She told him a few words and then flew back to her home. Li Yundong recalled what had happened before at home, calculating the gains and losses in his heart. Thinking of the danger, he suddenly thought, if it weren't for the fan of 7 treasures in my hand, wouldn't I have been dead just now? Li Yundong calmed down. Thinking of this, he felt cold sweat all over his body, and he felt a burst of fear in his heart. With a look of fear on his face, he took a few deep breaths and adjusted his qi. Only then did the fear in his heart slowly dissipate. Li Yundong looked around the living room and couldn't help smiling bitterly. Cultivation is really a very expensive thing. Just this burnt sofa alone costs thousands of yuan. I'm going to lose money again. I have to find a way to make money as soon as possible. But how do I get started? Chapter 242. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong thought for a while about how to make a fortune, but he still couldn't figure it out. He stopped thinking about it and sat cross-legged in the living room to practice qi all night. The next morning, he packed a few meals in a lunchbox, then took the fan of 7 treasures to the hospital to visit Zhou Qin. Watch Net. When he arrived at the hospital and walked to the inpatient building, he was about to enter the gate when he suddenly felt an object fall from the sky. He subconsciously raised his hand to catch it and felt something soft. When he looked closely, he saw that it was a pillow. Li Yundong looked up and saw Zhou Qin looking at him from the railing with a sweet smile. Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh. He raised the pillow in his hand and said, Hey, is this how you welcome me? Zhou Qin obviously seemed to be in a good mood. She smiled playfully and said, I accidentally fell down. Bring it up for me. Of course, Li Yundong didn't believe that the pillow had fallen down. He smiled and shook his head, then walked into the building with the pillow. When he arrived at the ward, he saw that Zhou Qin was already at the door, sitting in a wheelchair and looking at him with a sweet smile. Li Yundong smiled and said, You seem to be in a good mood today. Zhou Qin smiled and said, Yes, I see a big fool. Of course I'm in a good mood. Li Yundong pretended to be angry and glared at Zhou Qin. I came to see you with good intentions, but you actually mocked me. Zhou Qin's eyes twinkled. She pursed her lips and smiled. I'm not talking about you. What are you so excited about? Li Yundong smiled and didn't argue with her. It seems that what happened yesterday didn't affect you. What on earth made you so happy? Also, how did you know I was coming? How long have you been waiting on the balcony? Zhou Qin waved at Li Yundong and pushed the wheelchair to the bedside. She turned the notebook on the bed and said, Come and see. Li Yundong leaned over to take a look and saw that it was the school forum of Tiannan University. At a glance, it was full of gossip posts from last night's welcome party. 9 out of 10 posts were talking about him, and the titles were colorful and colorful. Li Yundong thought to himself. An old and a young couple, a new explanation of the legend of the sword and fairy, the social problems reflected by Zhao Linger's pursuit of the sword saint, Li Xiaoyao, you're a man without a house, a car, or a career. How can I love you? Li Yundong was dumbfounded. F***ck, these B***stards are really good at messing around. What kind of nonsense is this? Zhou Qin giggled and said, the posts here are so funny. There are all kinds of things. Watch net. 7 KOM. Li Yundong, don't think that you're the only badass student in Tiannan University. There are a lot of powerful people here. Li Yundong nodded quickly and said with a speechless expression, yes, there is always a higher mountain and a higher cow. The two of them chatted and laughed for a while. Li Yundong looked at the posts on the forum for a while and said with a smile, forget it, I don't want to read it. These people are too free. Shall we continue with the massage? Zhou Qin smiled and said, okay. Li Yundong thought to himself, it's really strange that you didn't respond at all to the last 2 massages. This time, I might as well massage directly near the wound. He said, don't go out today. Lie down and I'll massage your back. Zhou Qin was stunned for a moment. She suddenly said shyly, do I have to do it through clothes? Li Yundong suddenly thought of Xuanqi and ambiguous last time. He coughed dryly and said seriously, benefactor, I don't have the ability to treat wounds through clothes, so I have to offend you. Zhou Qin's cheeks were red. She giggled and said, are you an eminent monk or a lewd one? Li Yundong had never flirted with Zhou Qin before. At this time, he was teased by such a beautiful woman in front of him. Even though he had a firm mind, he couldn't bear it. He coughed dryly with a straight face and didn't dare to answer. Hurry up, get on the bed. Zhou Qin also rarely saw Li Yundong so embarrassed. She couldn't help blushing again and teasing him with a smile. Then you have to carry me to bed. Li Yundong took a deep breath and thought to himself, oh my god, what's wrong with this girl today? She's usually a very noble and proud girl. How could there be signs of becoming a pervert? Li Yundong coughed dryly and bent down. He put one hand under Zhou Qin's knees, and the other hand passed through her back and picked her up. This hug could be said to be like holding a fragrant jade in his arms. The beauty's breath was like orchids. Li Yundong didn't dare to look at her directly. He just put Zhou Qin on the bed without looking sideways. Zhou Qin looked at Li Yundong with some hidden bitterness in her heart. She lay on the bed and turned her head. Is this okay? Li Yundong saw that although Zhou Qin was wearing a loose white hospital gown, the curve of her figure was still exquisite, especially the curve of her buttocks, which were high like hills and mountains. Although her skin was not exposed, the curve was enough to make people's hearts beat faster. Go to the internet. Ever since Su Chan had appeared in his life, Li Yundong had been used to seeing all kinds of beautiful women. But at this time, he suddenly felt that Zhou Qin, the sickly beauty, had a different kind of charm. The hidden bitterness in her eyes made his heart beat wildly. Li Yundong took a deep breath and said in a low voice, it's not that I'm not determined, it's that the beauty is too beautiful. After reciting it a few times, Li Yundong felt as if he had been hypnotized, and his expression actually calmed down. Zhou Qin was angry and amused. She bit her lip and looked at Li Yundong with hidden bitterness, thinking that she should make some trouble for him, but Li Yundong's hand had already pressed on her back. This was the first time that a boy had touched her skin. As soon as Li Yundong's fingertips touched her smooth jade-like skin, Zhou Qin suddenly felt as if an electric current had passed through her body. Her body trembled slightly and she let out a soft cry. This charming and flirtatious voice could really move Lu Xiaohui's heart. Even Lu Xiaohui wanted to regain his masculinity. Li Yundong's Taoist heart was almost broken. He suddenly broke out in a sweat and pretended to be angry. He glared at Zhou Qin and said, "What are you shouting for?" Zhou Qin looked back at him with grievance and resentment. The look in her eyes could even refine Vajra Arhat. Li Yundong shouted in his heart, Amitba, no wonder the ancients said that beauty is a bone-scraping knife. This girl is trying to make me go crazy. After glancing at Li Yundong, Zhou Qin hugged the pillow and bit it hard with her teeth. She stared at Li Yundong with a pair of eyes that could speak, like a delicate willow that could not withstand the wind and rain. Li Yundong took a deep breath. He rubbed his temples and said with a wry smile, Come on, you'd better shout as much as you want. Don't look at me like that. I can't stand it. Zhou Qin burst into laughter, buried her face in the pillow, and said in a muffled voice, Hurry up. It won't be good if my father comes back and sees you. Li Yundong pressed his hand on the Shenshu and Qihai acupoints on Zhou Qin's back, gently transferring Yuanyang genuine qi. He said with a wry smile, He won't shoot me, will he? Zhou Qin giggled and said, That's hard to say. My father hates you. As she said this, she thought to herself, How can he not hate you? You made him lose his official position, and his precious daughter was stolen. Thinking of this, Zhou Qin felt shy and sweet for a moment. She thought of how Li Yundong had stood up to protect her last night, and how he had been taking care of her every day these days. She felt that she was the happiest person in the world. Zhou Qin let out a groan and hid her face in the pillow. Her ears were red with shame. After a while, she saw that there was no movement, so she quietly peeked at Li Yundong. However, Li Yundong's face was serious. His eyes were slightly closed, and his expression was focused, as if he was thinking about something. Zhou Qin couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. She turned her face sideways and looked at the boy intently while Li Yundong was lost in thought. There was no reason to talk about love. In the past, Zhou Qin's yearning for Li Yundong had been very complicated. There was a yearning for the mysterious power in his body, a rebellion in adolescence, and also a love for Li Yundong. But now, Zhou Qin felt that she simply liked this boy. She liked his eyes, his eyebrows, his lips, and everything about him. Even if he lost his strength and she lost her extraordinary family background, it didn't matter. As long as she could see him every day and talk to him for a while, she would be very satisfied. While Zhou Qin was looking at Li Yundong in a daze, she suddenly saw a few people coming in from the corner of her eye. It was her father, Zhou Keqiang, and 2 doctors. In the middle of them was a silver-haired middle-aged man. He lowered his head and was looking at the medical records and X-ray photos in his hands. The 2 doctors were talking to the middle-aged man in a low voice with a fawning look on their faces. It was as if they wanted to stick their faces to his buttocks. Even Zhou Keqiang was faintly fawning over the silver-haired middle-aged man. As soon as they entered the ward, Zhou Keqiang was stunned. The other 2 doctors were also stunned. They saw a young man putting his hand into Zhou Qin's clothes. Zhou Qin's eyes were full of lust, and her cheeks were flushed. Even a blind man could see that she was in love. Zhou Keqiang was furious. Be asterisk starred, even if you want to do something with my daughter, can't you choose a good place? Why are you so eager? The other 2 doctors also frowned and shouted, Hey, what are you doing? This is a ward, a hospital. Do you think it's a hotel sauna? This sentence was a little inappropriate. It seemed to imply that Zhou Qin was a mistress. Zhou Keqiang glanced at them unhappily, but he was already an ordinary person. Even if he was angry, he couldn't lose his temper, so he had to suppress his unhappiness in his heart. The silver-haired middle-aged man also frowned slightly, but when his eyes fell on Zhou Qin, he was immediately shocked. For a moment, there was greed and amazement in his eyes. When Zhou Qin was alone with Li Yundong, she would show some of the demeanor of a little girl, but once there was an outsider, her arrogant temperament and domineering temper returned to her body. She glanced coldly at the silver-haired middle-aged man, frowned, and said, what nonsense are you talking about? He is my classmate, and he is treating my illness. The two doctors thought that Li Yundong and Zhou Qin were doing something shameful in the ward. They were shocked by Zhou Qin's beauty and jealous of Li Yundong's luck with women. At the same time, they felt that the hospital had been tarnished and offended, so naturally, they spoke very rudely. One of the doctors sneered and said, "Treating a patient? Is this how you treat a patient? Who does he think he is? How can he treat a patient here?" The other doctor also snorted and said, "He hasn't even graduated from college. How dare he mess around here? Hey, what's your major? Do you know what her illness is? Do you know that messing around will cause people to die?" Li Yundong turned around and carefully looked at these people. His eyes fell on the silver-haired middle-aged man in the lead. He reached out his hand and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Are you Zhou Qin's attending doctor?" "Hello, I'm Li Yundong." The middle-aged man had an arrogant look on his face. He stretched out his hand indifferently, and his posture was condescending. He shook hands with Li Yundong as if he was giving alms. He said leisurely, "Are you a medical student?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "No." The middle-aged man snorted and coldly snorted, "Then I'll have to say a few words to you. Young man, don't be so arrogant. You don't know anything and yet you dare to mess around." Li Yundong frowned secretly and asked, "And you are?" The doctor next to him rushed to say, "This is Zhong Guofang, a well-known expert in neurovascular and oncology in our country." "Expert?" The expression on Li Yundong's face suddenly became strange. He thought to himself, isn't the title of expert now used to curse people? Last week, he ranked 9th on the flower list. This week, he broke out twice, on Tuesday and Saturday. Chapter 243. Go to watch net. Li Yundong had always shown limited respect for experts and scholars. He looked up and down at the neurology and oncology expert and saw that the man was not very tall, about 1.7 meters. He had silver hair, a slightly bald forehead, an oily face, and a fat belly. It was obvious that he ate a lot on weekdays and had tumors all over his body. No wonder he could become an oncology expert. A long illness makes a good doctor. Zhong Guofang glanced at Li Yundong and snorted inwardly. He was used to seeing people with awe and worship when they heard his name, especially those patients. When they saw him, it was as if they were seeing Buddha or Guanyin Bodhisattva. Watch net. 7 KOM. However, the temperament of the boy in front of him made him very uncomfortable. Although the boy looked young, his temperament was very calm. Seeing these people enter the ward and catch him doing something he shouldn't do, he didn't panic at all. Instead, he was calm and composed, looking at them calmly as if he was the attending doctor of this stunning beauty. Zhong Guofang was very disgusted with the feeling of turning against the host and being the guest. Even officials had to be polite to him. After all, no matter how high an official was, who wouldn't get sick? Didn't they still have to beg experts and scholars when they got sick? He was used to being fawned over. Today, he suddenly met Li Yundong, who not only did not fawn over him, but also looked him up and down with a questioning gaze. Naturally, he felt very unhappy. Zhong Guofang no longer looked at Li Yundong. He turned his face and looked at Zhou Qin with a kind expression, asking about her condition. However, Zhou Qin didn't have a good expression on her face. She was just lukewarm and indifferent, talking non-committally. Li Yundong ignored the supercilious looks of the two doctors next to him and listened carefully to the conversation between Zhong Guofang and Zhou Qin. When he heard Zhong Guofang say, "I've seen your radiographic films. I think you'll need surgery, but there's currently no such technology in the country, as soon as Li Yundong heard the word operation, he felt like his butt was on fire. He shouted, "Don't do it." Li Yundong knew that during the Three Kingdoms period, Hua Tuo also had the skills to perform surgery. However, according to the theory of traditional Chinese medicine, surgery was absolutely not encouraged unless it was a last resort. Watch net. When Western doctors performed surgery, they would sometimes make a horizontal incision in order to leave a smaller scar during the suture. This incision could sever one or even several meridians, no matter if it was on the body, back, limbs, or any other place. There were 8 extra meridians in the human body, and 12 in the hands and feet. If Zhou Qin's back was cut horizontally, the governor meridian near the spine would definitely be destroyed. The foot Taiyang bladder meridian and foot Shaoyin kidney meridian would also be cut off. Even if it was a vertical cut, the governing vessel would be cut open. Zhong Guofang and the 2 doctors turned to look at Li Yundong. Zhong Guofang's eyes were filled with mockery and disdain. "What do you think?" A doctor said impatiently, "What do you know? Don't interrupt if you don't know anything." Li Yundong suppressed the displeasure in his heart and said, "The human body is a big furnace. We usually have to hide our yuanqi well, so we pay attention to not talking when we eat, not talking when we sleep, and not talking when we sleep. If you cut her with a knife, not only will you cut open the furnace, but you will also cut off her governing meridian, causing more than half of the yuanqi in her body to run away. Are you saving her or harming her? Even if the tumor can be removed and the extravasated blood can be cleaned, once the governing vessel is severed, it can never be restored." When Zhong Guofang heard that, he turned around and looked Li Yundong up and down again. "You've studied Chinese medicine before?" Li Yundong said in a low voice, "A little." A doctor on the side laughed and said, "Do you still believe in this kind of thing in this day and age? Why don't you buy some talisman water for her to drink?" "That's right, the rotten wood in the coffin and the blood from a woman's menstrual cycle. Aren't those things used in traditional Chinese medicine? Good stuff." The other doctor also laughed out loud. Watch net. 7 KOM. Li Yundong knew that traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine were at odds with each other. However, it was the first time that he had seen someone who studied Western medicine slander traditional Chinese medicine. He was furious and retorted rudely, "Is your understanding of traditional Chinese medicine so shallow?" The doctor who had mocked him snorted and said, "Oh. What kind of profound understanding do you have? Tell me." Li Yundong walked up to Zhou Qin, suppressed his anger, and said, "The tumor and extravasated blood in Zhou Qin's body can be evacuated by the method of qi circulation. It can also be dredged by acupuncture. There's no need for surgery at all." The doctor laughed and said, "Qi circulation? Do you think you're a Qigong master? Come on, Qigong masters have been arrested now, okay? Even Li Yi, who was rumored to be evil a while ago, has been arrested. Don't you know?" Zhong Guofang, who had been watching Li Yundong coldly, also took the opportunity to teach Li Yundong a lesson. "Young man, history and facts have proven countless times that all the Qigong masters and health masters who have been advocating everywhere can't stand the test of time and are proven to be big liars. Why has traditional Chinese medicine declined? The root cause is that it's not scientific. It's pseudoscience. If you want to study medicine, I can recommend you to study at the top medical schools abroad." Li Yundong was furious when he heard this. All the theoretical foundations of cultivation and the source of everything originated from the theories of traditional Chinese medicine. In other words, they all originated from the supreme treasure of the cultivation world, China's first medical work, the Yellow Emperor's Canon of Internal Medicine. It was on the basis of this book that the various sects of cultivation and other medical works came into being. For example, the peerless cultivation work written by the great grandmaster of the Danding sect, Guhong, also contained a large number of medical monographs. Cultivation and traditional Chinese medicine were inseparable. Those who knew cultivation understood traditional Chinese medicine, and those who knew traditional Chinese medicine understood cultivation. This was the so-called 10 ways and 9 doctors. However, Zhong Guofang's words completely denied traditional Chinese medicine, which was tantamount to cutting off the foundation of cultivation and denying cultivation. What was the difference between this and digging up people's ancestral graves? As a cultivator, how could Li Yundong tolerate such a thing? Li Yundong was angry, so he flew into a rage. He looked at Zhong Guofang coldly and then said to Zhou Qin, "Do you have a mirror?" Seeing the anger in Li Yundong's eyes, Zhou Qin immediately took out a dressing box from under the pillow beside her and gave it to him. "There's a mirror in it." Li Yundong didn't stand on ceremony. He grabbed the dressing box, opened it, and faced the mirror at Zhong Guofang. He said angrily, "Look at your eyes. Do you know that your eyes are cloudy and your eyes are deep? What do you mean by that? Let me tell you, the eyes belong to the liver. This is a sign that your liver is seriously damaged. You must not sleep on time, eat on time, and drink alcohol." Li Yundong didn't wait for Zhong Guofang to refute. He pointed at Zhong Guofang's hair and said, "Look at your hair. How old are you this year? Looking at your face, you're definitely not over 60 years old, but your hair is so white. Do you really think you're an immortal with white hair and a youthful face? Let me tell you, the quality of your hair depends on your kidneys. If you're in your 50s and your hair is white like this, there's probably something wrong with your kidneys." Zhong Guofang was stunned by Li Yundong's words. Before he could react, he saw Li Yundong pull his shoulder with a finger and turn his back to him. The 2 doctors next to him immediately shouted, "Hey, what are you doing? A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists." Li Yundong turned his head and glared at them. "Shut up." The 2 doctors only felt a threatening aura coming at them, so frightened that they sat down on the hospital bed next to them. They wanted to say something, but their mouths opened and closed, unable to say a word. Zhong Guofang was already dumbfounded at this time. He only felt that Li Yundong's 2 hands were pressing on his waist and kidneys. Immediately, a feeling of soreness and numbness surged up, and he couldn't help but cry out. Li Yundong sneered and said, "Humph, sore and numb, right? Do you know why? You have a kidney deficiency, a big loss. Do you have tinnitus from time to time at night? The ear belongs to the kidney, and tinnitus means that there's something wrong with your kidney. Look at you, you're fat all over, and it's obvious that you have a lot of meals and drinks, so your liver is damaged." As he said this, Li Yundong grabbed Zhong Guofang's wrist again and felt his pulse. Then he reached out to pinch Zhong Guofang's cheek, forcing him to open his mouth. He glanced at his tongue and sneered, "The liver and kidney are the inside and outside of each other. Your liver is not good, and you often stay up late, so it will definitely affect your other internal organs. Moreover, your pulse is heavy, smooth, and weak, and your tongue is light, fat, and white. This is a typical symptom of kidney yang deficiency. You must like women, and you must have excessive sex. With your age and body, you like women so much, and you want to save face so much. There must be a lot of tiger and wolf medicine." Li Yundong's words were like a needle, and every word fiercely pierced the expert's heart. "It's a disease of kidney yang deficiency, but you still covet beauty and use tiger and wolf medicine. Let me tell you, you will die in less than 5 years." After this sentence, the whole ward fell silent for a moment. Zhong Guofang's face was ashen, and his whole body was trembling with anger. He pointed at Li Yundong, and his hand kept trembling. He kept saying you, but he couldn't say anything else. Deep in his heart, he was extremely frightened, because Li Yundong had turned over all his secrets in an instant, and every word had hit his sore spot. The other two doctors looked at Zhong Guofang's expression and looked at each other. Although they didn't say anything, they knew in their hearts that the boy had probably hit Zhong Guofang's weak spot. For a moment, they couldn't help but feel guilty. They subconsciously reached out to touch their hair, and then touched the position of their waist and kidneys, muttering in their hearts, being a doctor is a lot of pressure, and there are a lot of social engagements. There must be some sex to vent. Recently, a lot of white hair has grown, and my two kidneys often feel numb and weak. Is it also kidney yang deficiency? == 3:00 tomorrow. Chapter 244. Go to see net. Since the end of the Qing dynasty, Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine had become enemies. Western medicine regarded traditional Chinese medicine as pseudoscience. Many Chinese who studied Western medicine would rather die of illness than take a sip of traditional Chinese medicine, as if doing so could prove that they were on the side of science and were noble and great. Go to see net. Zhong Guofang and the two doctors denounced traditional Chinese medicine as pseudoscience, but Li Yundong's words were like a sharp needle, stabbing into their vitals. They had no choice but to believe it. Although they were muttering in their hearts, they still didn't believe Li Yundong. After all, when a duck was cooked, its mouth was still rotten. Zhong Guofang, who had been rendered speechless by Li Yundong's words, suddenly blushed and shouted, "You're talking nonsense and slandering me. You, what's your name? I'm going to sue you for slander." Li Yundong sneered, "Sue me for slander? How did I slander you?" One of the doctors next to him came to his senses. This is not a joke. If the news that Zhong Guofang was reprimanded by a young man gets out, it's not a big deal for him, but it's a big deal for the hospital. He's an outpatient specialist specially hired by the hospital. If that happens, won't the director take out his anger on them? The doctor immediately pointed at Li Yundong and said loudly, "Do you have any evidence to prove that what you just said is right?" Li Yundong heard this, squinted at him, and sneered, "Evidence? The evidence is all on his face. Can't you see it for yourself?" The doctor shouted, "Where? Why can't I see it?" Li Yundong saw that the doctor was starting to pester endlessly and lie through his teeth. He sneered and said, "Yes, of course you can't see it. You only have money and power in your eyes. How can you see the illness? You can tell me whether I'm sick or not." The doctor was so angry that his face turned red. Where did this little bastard come from? He's so uneducated. Li Yundong said angrily, "Who are you cursing?" The doctor also said angrily, "The little bastard cursed you." Li Yundong nodded and laughed. "Yes, the little bastard cursed me." Zhou Qin had been watching anxiously as Li Yundong and the others quarreled with each other. But when she heard what Li Yundong said, she burst into laughter. She suddenly remembered the scene when Li Yundong and Lu Chuan were quarreling in the classroom. She couldn't help thinking, "I thought this boy had grown up a lot, but I didn't expect him to still be a little boy in his heart. How cute." Girls who fell into the trap of love were unreasonable. Zhou Qin thought that Li Yundong was brave and heroic even when he was quarreling. She looked at him with interest, wishing that she could cheer for him from the side. Watch net. 7KOM. Color * caret and text learn % super # speed. Update. The doctor accidentally fell into Li Yundong's trap. He was suddenly stunned and looked at Li Yundong angrily. He wanted to take off his clothes, roll up his sleeves, and fight with him. Zhong Guofang slowly came back to his senses. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Little friend, you must speak objectively and based on facts. You speak irresponsibly without any basis. Isn't that slander? Zhong Guofang's words were righteous, and his face was even more awe-inspiring. Li Yundong sneered in his heart. What basis? Why did traditional Chinese medicine decline? It was very simple. Because it was a subjective knowledge. Almost all diagnoses came from human judgment. Western medicine could determine a person's illness through a variety of instruments, but traditional Chinese medicine could hardly produce an intuitive result like X-ray. Western medicine could take an X-ray and say that you were sick. This was an objective fact. But what about traditional Chinese medicine? That was what people said. I'm sick just because you say I'm sick. I won't admit it. What can you do to me? Li Yundong looked at Zhong Guofang's righteous face, but there was a trace of hooliganism in his bones. He felt a surge of anger rush to his chest and choke in his throat. He couldn't swallow it no matter how hard he tried. Zhou Keqiang, who was standing to one side, began to smooth things over. He said, Li Yundong, I know you have good intentions, but Qin Qin's illness can't be messed around, and she can't do whatever she wants. I think it's better to let Dr. Zhong treat her. Li Yundong glanced at him and said, Uncle Zhou, you don't believe that I can cure Zhou Qin's illness? Zhou Keqiang was choked by Li Yundong's words and couldn't speak. A doctor next to him sneered and said, You can cure her illness? Apart from other things, do you have a medical license? Do you have a medical qualification? Another doctor also said, Let me tell you, if you can cure her illness, our hospital can close down. You can be a doctor in the future. Zhong Guofang also joined the army of condemnation and said righteously, Little friend, seeing a doctor is not something that can be done by reading a few books. Don't make trouble here. It's better to go back to school and learn more. Seeing that these people were besieging him, Li Yundong took a deep breath and calmed down. He turned his head to look at Zhou Qin and said in a deep voice, Let her choose for herself. Zhou Qin, who do you want to treat her? Zhou Qin said without hesitation, Is there a need to ask? Of course it's you. I don't trust these fellows. Her words made Zhong Guofang and the two doctors' faces suddenly turn red. Zhong Guofang said angrily, You're really unreasonable. Then, he flicked his sleeves and was about to leave. Go to the internet. Color. Text. Learn. Net. Super_speed. More. New. Zhou Keqiang quickly smiled and said, Dr. Zhong, don't be angry. The children are not sensible. Don't lower yourself to their level. As he said this, he turned his head and glared at Zhou Qin. Qin Qin, apologize now. Zhou Qin sneered and said, Dad, are you kidding me? Why should I apologize to them? Am I wrong? Seeing that his precious daughter was losing her temper again, Zhou Keqiang couldn't help but say, Qin Qin, no matter what, they are here to treat your illness. Zhou Qin stopped talking. She whispered in her heart, I've been cured for a long time. Li Yundong said from the side, Uncle Zhou, if you believe me, I can cure Zhou Qin's illness in less than 2 days. There's no need for surgery at all. Zhong Guofang laughed out loud. Every quack doctor who sells dogskin plaster deceives their patients like this. They take advantage of the patient's eagerness to recuperate and deceive the patient by saying that they can quickly cure their illness. In fact, it's all a lie. In her situation, let alone 2 days, she may not be able to recover in 2 years. The doctor next to him also sneered and said, Humph, she still has to cooperate with the treatment. Otherwise, she won't be able to stand up for the rest of her life. Li Yundong's heart was full of anger. He suppressed his anger and said, What if I can cure her? Another doctor said sarcastically, If you can cure her, then I'll jump from here. You really know how to brag at such a young age. How dare you say such a thing when even the top experts in the country don't dare to guarantee it? You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Li Yundong was furious. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Zhou Qin suddenly raise her eyebrows and sneer. What did you just say? The doctor said without hesitation. I said, if he can cure this disease, I'll jump from here. Zhou Qin snorted angrily. She could stand Ding Nan humiliating herself in front of everyone, but she couldn't stand others humiliating Li Yundong in front of her. Zhou Qin lifted the bed sheet and moved her body to the side of the bed. She gritted her teeth and was about to stand up. Zhou Keqiang was so scared that his face turned ashen. Qin, what are you going to do? Don't get excited. Zhou Qin stretched out a hand and stopped Zhou Keqiang, who was about to come over to help her. She hesitated for a moment and thought to herself, if Li Yundong knows that I've recovered, will he ignore me? But this thought just flashed through her mind. Zhou Qin still gritted her teeth and stood up. As soon as her feet touched the ground, the eyes of the people around her immediately fell on her feet. Li Yundong was ready to support her. Zhou Keqiang, who was next to him, was also so nervous that his forehead was covered with sweat. Zhou Qin smiled at Li Yundong, then slowly straightened her back. She took a deep breath and said provocatively to the two doctors and Zhong Guofang, how is it? I'm all right now. The eyes of the two doctors were about to fall out of their sockets. They pointed at Zhou Qin and stammered, how can you stand up? Zhong Guofang also looked at Zhou Qin with his mouth agape, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. How is this possible? Zhou Qin pointed at Li Yundong and sneered. Do you know why I can stand up? It's because he comes to massage me every day to dredge my blood vessels, so I can get better. Zhong Guofang cried out involuntarily, impossible, it can't be so fast. It's only been a few days. This is absolutely impossible. As he said this, he turned his head and shouted at the two doctors, did you show me the wrong X-ray? One of the doctors didn't react and just stared at Zhou Qin in a daze. The other doctor reacted quickly and said loudly, yes, you must have taken the wrong X-ray. After he shouted, the doctor next to him also reacted and said loudly, what a miracle. You can actually recover by yourself. Zhou Qin saw that they were all shameless and refused to admit that it was Li Yundong who had done it. She couldn't help but fly into a rage. She pointed at Zhong Guofang and scolded, didn't you say that it would take 2 years for me to recover? Let me tell you, Li Yundong cured me in 2 days. He used the traditional Chinese medicine technique that you despise. As she said this, Zhou Qin pointed at the doctor who had said that he would jump off the building if he could cure her and said loudly, now I'm standing here fine. Do you remember what you said just now? I think you definitely don't remember. You dare to deny what you just said. I think it's better for you to end your life as soon as possible. I'll give you a silk banner with the words eliminate evil for the people written on it. Then you won't have lived in vain. Zhong Guofang and the two doctors were red in the face and speechless. They wanted to refute, but the truth was in front of them, so they couldn't say anything. Zhong Guofang's face turned purple. He snorted and walked away. Zhou Qin shouted behind him, hey, remember, don't just play with women in the future. Be careful. Zhong Guofang staggered and turned his head to look at Zhou Qin and Li Yundong with resentment in his eyes. Then, he quickly walked away. The remaining two doctors looked at each other and chased after him while shouting and yelling. Looking at their figures, Zhou Qin sneered and said, I don't think they have any real medical skills, but I think their ability to flatter is at the international level. Zhou Qin, a girl with unparalleled beauty, was really sharp when she got angry, attracting patients from other wards to watch the fun. An old lady who had chatted with Zhou Qin on weekdays couldn't help but ask, daughter of the Zhou family, what happened to make you so angry? As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly saw Zhou Qin standing on the ground. She cried out involuntarily, "You're all right? When did this happen? How did you recover so quickly?" When Zhou Qin faced these doctors and experts, her face was as cold as frost, but when she turned her face, she smiled like a gentle breeze. She said with a smile, "Grandma Su, my feet are all right." As she said this, she took a few steps in the ward. Old Lady Su looked Zhou Qin up and down in shock. She had seen Zhou Qin move into the hospital with her own eyes. She had also seen Zhou Qin's change from despair to cheerful and lively, from paralyzed in bed to alive and kicking. All these changes had happened in just 2 or 3 days. Old Lady Su asked with a shocked face, "How did you cure it? How many days has it been? Who did it?" Zhou Qin pursed her lips and smiled proudly. Li Yundong, who had been standing beside her, smiled and said, "It was him. Don't look at him because he is young. He is a great master." Grandma Su turned her head and looked Li Yundong up and down. She didn't believe that such a young man could have such great skills and means, but the truth was right in front of her, so she had to believe it. Moreover, the elderly were the most realistic. Sometimes, no matter how much you boasted, it was useless, but when they saw the truth with their own eyes, they immediately believed it. Old Lady Su knelt down in front of Li Yundong with a thud and said loudly, "Little magic doctor, please help this old woman, /OM/ for 527894194. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.